You're listening to the Cantina Cast, your home for thought-provoking Star Wars talk. Join Albert and Jonesy in breaking down the latest news, trailers, movies, and of course, your favorite characters from a galaxy far, far away.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Cantina Cast. My name is Albert Padilla, and this is episode 463, our season 1 recap of Andor, and a look ahead to season 2 based on some speculation of our own, as well as some things that were dropped by some of the more recent actors that in interviews, and Tony Gilroy, and whatever else we can mix into all of this craziness that is going to be season 2 that unfortunately is still a year away, but luckily has started filming. We just got word of that in the last couple of days, so they are well underway filming this, and it's going to be exciting. So, and speaking of exciting, I'm excited to bring on somebody with us tonight. Jonesy, as always. Jonesy's here. How are you doing tonight, sir?
I'm doing all right. How are you, friend?
I'm good. I am well rested. I got lots of things to talk about and excited to do so.
Called you friend. I was like, man, I think I'm like Boba Fett or something from the animated series or something.
Hello, friend.
Hello, friend. Sure, friend. No, man, I'm glad to be back, man. It's been a whole week off, which is kind of an inside joke of Albert and I don't know how to take time off.
It's been a week. It's been 7 days. So, but no, we're glad to be talking about this because I'm excited because we've been putting off like a lot of the speculation and tabling that, and just because I think we recorded almost 2 hours of a breakdown on that last episode, so this will give us the due time that we need to really get into some of the speculation and weeds of stuff that we care about that probably most people don't.
Hey, but we have a wonderful set of live stream people here to cheer us on as we go forward, though. So that's pretty exciting. And actually, we had a pretty decent news day today, too, which is pretty exciting.
Yep, that's for sure. Let's get into that real quick, if you don't mind. Let's talk about some of the things that happened in the news.
Bum, bum,
let me pull up my screen because I do have
bum, bum, ba-dum, bum. What's that sound?
Spoiler alert. So let's talk about this first, because today we got news that season 3 of Mandalorian is set to premiere March 1st, 2023. I love that it says exclusively on Disney Plus, as though
it was going to be somewhere else.
Right, exactly. Like it was going to get released on Nicktoons or something, Now, of course, there's not a lot here, right? I mean, it's pretty much just the announcement. We've got a date, which is huge, exciting. We know it's coming. We knew it was coming. But, I mean, that's really it. But what do you think? Here's a big question. When do you think we're actually going to see the next version of a trailer, given that this is in March? Because probably not much longer, huh?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think we will. All right, so what do we got? We got Bad Batch coming in January, right? But we've still not really, a lot of rumor and speculation. We're getting a trailer for that soon too, another official one. But I would expect that one to be coming very, very soon. But I would think, what do we normally get with the media blitz? It's like 30 to 45 days out, right? Is when things really start kicking into gear. And then within that last 20 days, really everything with the TV spots and everything else. So I think we'll get through the end of the year, probably a little bit quiet. But as we get into that January and the last half of January, I would expect that the media engine will start to kick up with Mandalorian, and we'll probably get a new trailer right there within that 60-day out time frame. So right at the end of January, probably beginning of February.
Okay. Yeah. So and that's where I was thinking. However, some of the more credible rumor sites are saying we may get something on Christmas Day, some kind of a trailer. I think they're trying to do something before the end of the year, maybe. I don't know. Again, that's not official, and we normally don't talk about rumors, but there's enough substance behind this that maybe they do drop it a little bit early, which I think it's fine. Either they do it at the end of January, or end of December, sometime in January. I think that's pretty much a given, and somewhere in that time frame, that window. But yeah, and we'll get a full length trailer, I would imagine, at that point, since we've already had this teaser that's been out now for what, 2 months now? Month? I don't know, however long it's been.
Yeah, it's been a while. Yeah, I mean, forever. Cool. If they want to give us a Christmas gift, we will not say
Merry
no.
Christmas.
Yeah, we will. We will say thank you, and we'll be generous to our Star Wars overlords.
Better than socks. better than socks.
Well, that depends on the socks. I've got some.
It does
I've got
depend
some
on
pretty
the
cool
socks.
socks.
Yeah. Speaking of which, we'd like to plug our latest sponsor. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, I wish that'd be nice.
Wait,
Okay,
so that's
socks or
exciting.
Starbucks because you're holding a Starbucks tonight.
Yeah, I'm doing my peppermint mocha tonight. So.
Oh, peppermint mocha. We have.
Peppermint mocha.
Is that an upgrade from the pumpkin spice latte?
Well, no. It's just now that it's December 1st, it's all about the peppermint mocha. So November is dedicated to pumpkin spice. This is dedicated to peppermint mocha.
See,
how it works.
Both of those much should just be eggnog latte, as far as I'm concerned. Because eggnog latte is pretty legit there.
All right. The other two things that happened, we got the cover for the Jedi Battlescars novel. That's kind of like it runs in tandem with the game that's coming out here.
It's a prequel to the video game that's a sequel to a previous video game.
Right.
Did I get that right?
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Okay, got it.
So it leads up to it, right? It says, in the years before Star Wars Jedi Survivor, which is the sequel to Jedi Fallen Order.
Right.
And there's some information in here. We won't get into this, but we'll get to this in due time. But it is kind of exciting to actually see the cover finally. I haven't seen the cover for the game. Like, I was looking at this and going, doesn't really do a whole lot for me, but it could just be a rebranding of the same cover that's on the book. And maybe as a book cover, it's kind of vibrant. I mean, there's some pretty colors here.
Yeah, it is. And Sad Mags is the author, and Fitz Brother is going to feature prominently, of course, in it. And all the returning characters you'd expect to see. So again, no real surprises, I guess. But I like the blues and the greens and the reds. The colors are really nice. I mean, it looks like the video game.
Yeah.
I'm curious what story they're going to tell, though. I mean, considering we're going to a sequel follow-up video game, and now we're going to go, between the last one and this one. It's like, okay. So, but clearly there's a big enough time jump that there's something interesting to be able to tell us here. I don't really always get into video game novels a whole lot. I know that we've had some pretty good ones in the past, but
yeah, Inferno Squad.
Yeah, Inferno Squadron was good. Yeah, and so there's some of that, and of course, everybody loves Marin a lot, and I can understand. I mean, the design of the character, she's the Night Sister, so a lot of people are really excited to see this character come back and explore more of her, and probably ship her with everybody because she's just beautiful looking. So yeah, so there's a lot of interest in that character as well. So I'm excited that the video game franchise has done well and has taken off, and that we finally had a really good, solid video game that people are excited for it to come back around and give us another round. So
yeah,
that's a good thing. That's a good thing.
It was like, what was cool was you were a Jedi, you had Force powers, but at the same time it was humbling. It wasn't like a Force Unleashed or any of the other.
It was still story driven, right?
Yeah, exactly. Where it's over the top kind of thing. Yeah, right. And for anybody that's interested, so they did provide, and I have it pulled up, but we're not going to talk about it because it could be considered spoilers, depending on what you're trying to do here. But it does have the official jacket copy in text on the website. So if you want to know what this book's about and what's kind of already happened between the video game and this novel, it's here. So go check it out. If you've not had a chance to play the video game, you're probably not going to know who half of these people are, because it does a lot of name dropping for prominent characters that were carryovers from the video game. So
what's the release date? What's the release date on the game or on the book? I didn't see that anywhere in there.
Yeah, the novel is March 7th, 2023, but they did not mention the game, and I'm sure I have not been following this very closely. Although they didn't announce it at Celebration either, did they?
No, it came out different time though.
Later.
Yeah.
So if you want to research that on the fly, feel free to do so. But yeah, we're looking at least March 7th for the novel.
There we go. I didn't scroll past the video. I got stuck on the video, as many a good, lazy people do. Ooh, pretty lights.
Shiny object.
Exactly. And Kristen Baver telling you everything you think you need to know, and then still not listening and hearing the date.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And then what I would call Star Wars adjacent, or maybe Lucasfilm adjacent. Yeah, there's this new IP that's launching here next year called Indiana Jones. I'm not too familiar with this.
Yeah, I hear this Harrison Ford dude's pretty good.
Yeah. But no, the trailer dropped tonight. We're recording this as of December 1st. But the film is scheduled to release June 30th, 2023. We got a movie poster, which, this says it all, right? It's just got him, the fedora, the trademark look, and then the date of June 30th. There is a trailer that's kind of small, but I mean, it does give you a sense of what's going on. At least you get to see some of the action sequences. You don't really get much in terms of the plot, but I was,
And of course, well, we got a name for it too. Indiana Jones and the
yeah,
Dial of Destiny. What do you think about that?
I like it. I'm already fighting people about this. I'm not even
Really?
kidding you. Like I've got 4 conversations going on right now on 4 different sites about people already lashing out at the title, and I'm like,
Why?
do you not
Wait,
understand
I
this
don't
IP?
understand people.
Like Temple of Doom, right? Crystal Skull, Raiders of the Lost Ark. It's pulpy. That's the whole point. It's supposed to be this way. I don't understand. I'm so like I'm
I mean,
sorry.
that's
Oh,
the
I got
thing.
a
Like
soapbox.
the video game Fate of Atlantis, right? All of the books that came out were all very much like this, and we could say that they are, those are not canon or whatever you want to call it. But I mean, this is what Indiana Jones is. I mean, this is the classic pulp. What's the word? Like the serial.
Cereals.
Yeah,
Yep.
the serial. I mean, this was it in its purest format.
Yeah.
And so I like it. I mean, Dial of Destiny is obscure enough to where it
Hmm.
gives you like, okay, well, what could the Dial of Destiny be? And there's already people out there doing videos on it about what it might be and what it is,
Yeah.
and so on and so forth. So I encourage you to go out there and YouTube it. But I think this is really cool. I thought the trailer was actually pretty good. I thought it hit the right notes. It gets you. I think in some of the places that Kingdom Skull, man, that it felt a little bit, it didn't, maybe not felt right, but it just kind of felt a little forced. This one feels like maybe they got that vibe right this time.
Yeah.
With being out of his element, being maybe past his day, but still being brought back in. And it looks like they're doing, from what I noticed, it looks like a lot of de-aging as well to make Harrison Ford look like he's back in his 40s and 50s, not necessarily back in his 20s. I think there's some of that though, but so I think there's a bit of that as well, which I think will help. But
I want to touch on that because just quickly, because
Mhm.
this has come up before. I mean, we've been talking about this on this podcast and in Star Wars land, Star Wars discussions ever since the passing of Leia, and bringing in characters or bringing in actors to. We have the whole CGI thing now. The deep fakes is probably the better tech in my opinion.
Sure, yeah,
This doesn't seem like de-aging. This seems like some kind of a deep fake process, similar to what we saw with Luke Skywalker in Mando season 2. But I mean, and I got into another conversation with somebody else, and this wasn't really
wait,
contentious. It was just
conversation or argument?
no, it wasn't an argument.
Okay,
This wasn't contentious. It was just me simply saying, "Wow, I mean, we are entering, if we're not already there, the age of we don't need the actors. We don't need the original actors, and so something like this open up the opportunities for another solo movie, right? And I know we've got Alden, and I'm not saying I don't want to take anything away from what he's done. I know there's a Make Solo 2 Happen initiative that's still moving forward and people are pulling for it, but this just really opens up a ton of possibilities, all legal stuff aside, right? I mean, they've got to sort all that out and between rights and looks and all of that. But I mean, at some point, we are going to get to where we don't need the actors, we don't need the real actors and the tech around voice technology. Right? That's still like the last piece that I think they're still kind of come around. We saw this with what was it with
James Earl
Vader?
Jones, yeah.
Yeah, James Earl Jones. But it was close, right? And that's just going to get better over time. So I don't know. I think it opens up a lot of possibilities. I'm excited about it, but I do understand that some people are like, "Ooh, that's kind of a scary path, and how far is too far?" And
Well, and I think the key part of this is, and that's why I was really particular about how far do you go back? So I'm just calling it de-aging because just kind of call it what it is. They're just trying
yeah,
to
no,
make
that's a
them,
good general term because it's exactly how they
yeah,
get there.
yeah.
Probably
Don't
different
really,
ways, right?
yeah. Don't really care. It'll evolve and change over time anyway, right? But I mean,
Yes,
it's the
exactly.
idea of being able to say, I'm not bound by the age of the character today in real terms. I can tell the story I want to, regardless of how they appear on screen. Because let's be honest, as actors get older, they end up going to certain roles because physically they can only do so many things, and they look very different from the parts, especially these serial type of movies or these franchises where they have been with it for so long. I mean, and Raiders came out in 1981, right?
Hmm.
So I mean, we're we're pushing 45. I mean, we're pushing 40. Is my math right? 41 years, 42 years since it'll come out.
Yes. Yep.
By the time this comes out, so it's a long time for one person in the character. We know Harrison Ford's getting up there in age, but I like it when they go back a little bit. Take off 20 or 30 years. Don't take off 40 or 50. Right. And I think that's something that's important. And they've learned a little bit about what makes the most sense and then how much to use it and when to use it. And so I think that's something I wish I wish I would have gone in there and kind of earmarked some of the dates. But like, yeah, this one right here, that's a great one. Like he's in his like a Nazi costume. He looks like he did back in, Temple or not Temple of Doom, but maybe like Raiders of the Lost Ark or maybe Last Crusade.
Yeah, this is probably Last Crusade era, I would guess.
Yeah.
I don't know if could you see that full screen? I couldn't. It like took my whole thing here.
No, it did. Oh yeah, there it goes. Yeah, it keeps clicking off every time you click off.
How about there? Can you see that now?
Yeah, a little fuzzy, but you get the idea though. I mean,
right.
Again, you can tell some work has been done, but if you were watching it and you're going to this flashback type of thing, then I think it can work, and I think it does work. I think we've proven that it works. And when you have the actor, I think having the actor there, and I don't know if I'm willing to go as far as saying we could replace actors and they won't be there. I think we've been saying this with CGI and everything for so long that we're still not there. And I think we keep proving that we're still not there. And a big component of that is that the actors actually have to sign over their voice and likeness in order for this to work. And I don't know that
James Earl Jones did.
He did. He signed over his voice, right?
Yeah.
But I don't know that a lot of them will want to do this unless they've really got a huge like IP behind their name.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. There's got to be some zeros behind. It feels like, I hate to say it's a money thing, but it kind of is at the end of the day, right? I mean, they want their beneficiaries to be paid for this, right?
Yeah, and it's a question. I mean, because we see this with books, right? With literature, after so many years, they just become like you're publishing, rights to it, I guess. And I'm not really clear about all of this stuff, but it seems like after so many years, they just kind of become open to the public. Or maybe this is the classic literary works are like this, right? But at what point does that kick in? That's really general.
I don't know. It's like 50 years, 60 years, something like
that.
It's
not that long, right?
Right. And I think it's, I think they're probably going to, if it were me, we've probably moved, I would assume we've moved the goalposts at times, right? Because, when we first roll this out and somebody's talking about rights, well, like when stuff like this happens, well, then, okay, so maybe it needs to be extended a little bit farther before it becomes public domain or maybe it never becomes public domain now because of the technology, right? I don't know.
But anyway, I think this is a great title. I think it's cool. I think it's short. I'm super excited. I'm more excited for Indy than I realized I would be. And I think the trailer has been a big part of that about how we're going to portray this character. Not ignoring that he's older, but also leveraging the parts that still make it feel like Indiana Jones, and it's going to give us that excitement and that, I don't know, that indiness to it, right? That adventure side of it is not going to feel slowed down because Harrison Ford is a certain age. It's really going to still feel lively and really capture that and stylize in a certain way too of what we're seeing. And I believe they're in Times Square or something like that with some of the scenes that we're getting.
We should do a Patreon episode on this. Just spitballing, like if we could, let's fast forward 10 years from now and we could tell any story and the limitations of the actors being alive and the voice stuff is already wrapped up. What would we want to see? Just the possibilities are endless in my head, but it'd be fun to talk about. Okay.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So no, exciting stuff. I'm excited to see Andy. As I've said it many times on this show and The Basement. Raiders of the Lost Ark is my favorite movie all time. So this is right up there with me in terms of what I want to see. But
I'm right there with you. Empire and Indiana Jones. I mean, I just can't. It's really hard to distinguish between the two. They're different, but I love Indiana Jones. It was my go-to movie growing up. I would just always have it on.
So. Yeah, it's the music.
It really is. I mean, God, John. I mean, we haven't even talked about that. Who's going to score it? Because John Williams is retired.
Yeah,
I don't believe John. Wait, is John Williams doing?
Go ahead. I'm looking through here.
Yeah, because I know
John Williams, who has scored each and is once again composing the score.
Okay, I know he was like he's just about retired, and there were some in his queue that he was finishing up, but I couldn't remember if Indy was in it. I wanted to say that Indy was one of the last ones, if not the last one.
Yeah.
So
he's not going to let this go without getting his name on there too.
Exactly. I mean, you got to close it out, right? I think this might be his last one. I think this might be.
I would imagine. At
John Williams' career at this point, yeah.
Yeah. 90, what is he, 94, 93?
Yeah, I mean, just let's go ahead and put him in carbonite and make sure we preserve him for the next generation, please.
Put him in a Snoke tank and let's just clone him later.
There you go. You know who I wish we could clone though, Albert?
Who's that?
Our
Jonesy?
Patreon members. They're amazing. We have now part of the tribe members: Mike, Rob, Lauren, Dante, Risk, Justin, and Jackson, Sharkman, Dan, Daz, and of course Isabella. And then Delusions of Grandeur, Rod, Eugene, and Kathy. Thank you everyone so much for all of your contributions and your support throughout the years, and for if you're recent joiners in the recent months. We do appreciate it. We do have another Patreon show coming up this weekend on Sunday, and we are in the process of getting candidates for that. We are going to go back and revisit From a Certain Point of View with Andor. We're going to wrap up the last half of the season with our top 3 moments with our esteemed Patreon members. And yeah, touch and see what from episode 7 to 12, what everyone's favorites were there. And then we're actually going to come back and do another. I don't know if you knew this, Albert, but we're going to come back and do a second From a Certain Point of View in the month of December, because 'tis the season of giving.
Right.
And we're going to come back and do another round of From a Certain Point of View. And you actually had this idea of, ranking our favorite Star Wars television shows of just like
Who would have
all
thought we would
time.
ever do that? Like, that's just, even just hearing that is like weird.
Well, let's get some clarification, because I haven't actually clarified this with you a whole lot.
Okay.
Is this for all time? Like includes like Ewoks and droids and Caravan of Courage and all that?
I mean, if you want to include those as television, sure. But
or are we just
I think
talking
the
about
focus-
Disney Plus?
I was thinking more Disney Plus era. Maybe we throw those in his honorable mention type rankings if we want. But
So Clone Wars still counts, but does Rebels? I mean, because Clone Wars was in the Disney Plus era.
Technically it was. Yeah, it was.
So does that count? And Rebels does not count, or Rebels we'll throw it in there because it was animated, or in Resistance.
I think,
or do we just?
So we don't. Yeah, so we don't get too crazy here. I would say in scope would be anything live action. How about that? Live action Disney Plus.
Okay,
fair enough.
There we go. That helps me craft a note.
If somebody wants to really make a strong argument for one of the others, then yeah, it's their point of view, right? So I don't want to keep anybody tied down to that.
You tell me how wrong my point of view is all the time.
Well, that's because you're the co-host, man. I can't. I mean, that's just
Okay.
part that comes with the job, dude. I can't do anything about that. So,
got it.
Okay. Hey, before we go any further, I just want to give a quick shout out to a musician named Topher Leone. He's got 2 albums out. Go check his music out. He's got like 15,000 followers on YouTube. He's also a Twitch streamer as well. He twitches or streams Fortnite if you're into that game.
Streams is twitching.
But he's a listener of the show. Supporter of the show, and I just want to say hello and thanks for following the show and being there for us, man. So I do appreciate that.
Yeah, and another shout out, another new joiner to the Ear Glue Media Network is One Hell of a Fanfic, which is a Star Wars fan fiction podcast that just launched by Lauren and Stephanie, which is really super exciting. I know, right? So they got their first episode published about a week ago, and we got it all up on the website and everything else, and it turned out great. So if you are into Star Wars fan fiction, and of course they just ripped the Band-Aid off, let's go right into some Reylo with one of their favorites. You can go out there and listen to it over at eargluemedia.com/fanfic. But of course, it's on all your major podcast catchers. Of course, One Hell of a Fanfic. You get a great like purple rebellion logo with some microphones on there. So no, the ladies did a really fantastic job. They're doing everything from nuts to bolts. Editing and everything. So super proud of what they've been able to do. They're looking to release that on a monthly schedule, I believe. So really exciting stuff. If you'd like to go out there and check that out, I know they would appreciate it. eargluemedia.com/fanfic.
Hold on. Well, I want to pull up. I want to see this. So yeah, let's show the logo real quick. There it is. Boom.
Yeah. Pretty exciting.
Look at them. And they got like a little picture too.
Yeah. And they're both like yielding lightsabers and everything else.
I know. It's like the yin yang of Star Wars, like of podcasting. So good on you, ladies. I'm excited. I haven't listened to this, so it's kind of busy with the Thanksgiving and all that. But yeah, I'll get around to listening to that. And I don't know, who knows? Maybe I'll force myself onto that show so I can talk about the fanfic I like to read.
Oh, I thought you meant the fanfic that you like to write.
Well, there is that too. So okay.
Yeah, but again, so congratulations to both of them. Welcome to the Eagle Media family, of course, and we hope everyone will go check those out.
Yeah,
let them know how much you like it.
Okay, Lord, send us your Rex, Albert. Okay, we'll talk after the show. All right, let's talk. 24 minutes in, let's talk about season 1 series of Andor, and what I want to do is just kind of get into. Let's talk about some of the, again, I've had these questions kind of queued up ever since like 2 episodes ago, and I kept thinking, no, we'll let's save it for the final. And I was like, no, let's save it for the recap. So we're finally here. Let's do that, and then we'll spend some time kind of focusing on the characters, at least from a character perspective, about season 2, and mix in other questions as well. There is an interview, by the way. I just want to quickly mention this. There's an interview that's on StarWars.com. It's with Tony Gilroy. I think Collider has done one as well. I know Maggie, who's part of our network as well, with Petticoats and Poppies. She put out an article with the interview with Tony Gilroy, talking about season 1, and there's one other one that escapes me right now that he's done. So he's been out there, kind of putting a bow on everything for a lot of people, clearing up some confusion and things. So I want to leverage some of that. But if you haven't had a chance, go read that article. It's pretty. I think we've talked a lot about what he's kind of confirming in there, which is, if you listen to the show, then you're in good order. But there is a question that he had at the very end of the StarWars.com article that I want to pick your brain on, because quite honestly, I didn't understand the question. And I want to get your thoughts on what did he mean by this. But it is something that's speculative, going into season 2. So now that I've teased that,
Well, and Star Wars
yeah.
today, Star Wars this week came out today. Of course, it's Thursday, so this always
I
comes
didn't
out.
catch that. Yeah.
Yeah, and so Diego Luna was on there, and it was one of those kind of faux interviews with Kristen Baver, and he talked about Cassian's journey throughout it. So I highly recommend people go watch it, because it more or less, I think, reaffirms a lot of the things that we had talked about where he went, came from and to. But being able to hear Diego Luna talk about the character from start to finish, about where he went, and be able to be more open about it is worth the few minutes. And again, it's just, I mean, gosh, that segment's probably 45 seconds or a minute or something like that. It's not super long, but again, go watch that. I don't want to take any words out of his mouth, and hear it straight from him about the characters, everything from Marva to all the people in his life all around him, about the journey that he took throughout the series. So I think well worth your investment in time there for a few minutes.
Okay, so the first question I've got is, like, what worked for you in the series? And I'm going to leverage or weave in some of the conversation we had in our final hype episode, which aired before we even saw a single episode of this, right? It was purely speculative, based on the trailers and the teasers and some of the information that was coming out from the press circuit that those guys were on.
Yeah, we had two main drivers, right, about what it had to do to get right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's in here too. I want to get your thoughts on that, but just kind of overall, like, what was it that you really enjoyed about this series?
Man, I think one, man, the way that it just felt like Rogue One. I mean, it really captured the spirit of Rogue One, and it just felt perfectly tied to it. The characters were all of there, and it just felt very. It just felt like it felt like a prequel, because it was, but to recapture that magic, I guess, and to recapture that feeling of where we're coming, like, where do we need to get to, and not losing sight of that, and not feeling hamstrung by it, or feeling like everything is telegraphed. It really did a fantastic job. And I mean, and again, I think some of the things, like the writing in particular, the music was very interesting a lot of the times, and sometimes it was absolutely brilliant the way that they did it. Of course, Nicholas has got a video out there as well about his part of that, like scoring the band was one of the first thing they did, which we talked about last week, which was really exciting. But I mean, just the way that they put this together, it just didn't feel like there were any misses. I mean, how often can you say that about a television series over the course of 12 episodes? And I was actually on the call with some folks for work yesterday, and they wanted to get my thoughts on it. Like, no, hear y'all's thoughts on it. And he had told me, because I told him his name's Mike. I was like, Mike, what do you think about it? Because he kind of got in a little bit late. He was like, yeah, I think it's gonna be good. But what do you think about the end of the day? And he said, you know what? I don't know what it was. Like, everything about it was just perfect. Everything just really worked. Everything felt like the characters were perfectly written. Everything was applied right. And there were just no misses. Every episode seemed to just have more at stake. And I asked him, I was like, so do you feel like there was any filler? And he had said, no, he's like, it was so important. Like, everything you could actually go back and think about it and talk about it if you had someone to talk to about it. Some people don't want to talk to you about it. I'm like, hey, that's what we're here for.
Yeah, tune into this episode or this series.
Right. But I mean, and that in its essence, I think that was the really the cool thing to hear validated because I know this really matters a lot to Tony Gilroy, of saying that they weren't filler episode. Like the episodes that delivered those really hard hitting moments. The reason why they work so well is because of those episodes that felt more developmental. They felt a little slower. And I think you really have to point back to those first couple of episodes, right? That really set that tone and really set that pace. That yes, it can be exciting. Yes, it can deliver on these Star Warsy type of, traditional Star Warsy type of moments. But we can pick that up and bring it in downstream later, and we can still talk about this throughout the entire 12 episode season. And one of the things that Mike had told me was that he had said that it had enough time to breathe. Like 12 episodes, it didn't feel short. It didn't feel like we had to cram a bunch of things into 5 or 6 episodes. It needed all of this space to really breathe. And I told him I couldn't agree with him more. I think the length of this show was absolutely perfect the way they did it. And if they needed 15, I bet you they would have taken 15.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I would echo everything he said. I mean, I think of what stands out for me, what worked the most in the series. First and foremost, I think it's the writing, right?
Yeah.
Beyond anything else, it's probably the writing. And then very close second is the acting. And I mean, for a TV series or anything, right? TV's movies. I mean, I don't know what else you would really want if those two things are. I mean, maybe direction, right? And I think that worked as well. But I mean, if you got those two things, I mean, that's two of the three holy trinity in terms of what keeps you what keeps you engaged and what keeps you coming back to want to see the next episode. On top of that, we got everything else, right? We got the music, we got the cinematography, we got some great editing. There's great pacing. There's great build up in some of these episodes. All of thematically, there were some really great things that were happening there, both in Star Wars world and then, reckoning to our own, or hearkening to, I should say, hearkening to our own real world experiences and some of the relationships and things that people struggle with in kind of their everyday normal lives. And I want to come back to that here in a little bit too, because I think that was one of the things we were talking about, whether this series would be successful or what we were worried about is whether it would be too generic. Did it feel like would it feel not Star Warsy enough? And I think, in my opinion, uh, well, no, we'll come back to that. Sorry, because I do want to. It cuts both ways, I guess, is what I'm saying there. But the other thing that I really liked about this series, there were a lot of people that I know personally that really weren't, again, Star Wars fans, but came to this and they didn't come initially. Don't get me wrong. Like
Right.
there were a number of folks that I knew that were like, yeah, I tuned in for the first 3 and then bounced because it just wasn't me, right? But there was something about the either I mean, the Narkina 5 arc is some of the best Star Wars we've ever had. I don't think any people, very few people, I think, would agree with that or disagree with that. But there was something really, whether it was the arc itself or the timing, I don't know what was going on at that point, but it felt like there was, maybe it was just the press that was coming. It was, Andy Serkis, but something called people back to the series around that time and gave them enough to like stick or like give them enough initiative to stick around, motivation to stick around long enough to get to that particular arc. And what I found is I think there are a lot of people now that, again, that I've spoken to personally who either came back to it because they were Star Wars fans and they felt they got better or knew that it was going to get better, or they heard it was going to get better, or because it wasn't so steeped in the mythology of Star Wars, right? It didn't come with this burden of knowing, 6 seasons of Clone Wars and all the movies and all the books, right? You didn't have to go in with a lot of that stuff. And it was grounded more in reality, right? The characters were real people. They were dealing with real situations. It's not to quote, Tony Gilroy prior to the season starting, but this is exactly what he was wanting. He wanted these real world scenarios so that people could it would resonate with them, right? They could connect with the characters and connect with some of the challenges that they were going through. And so from that perspective, I think it worked really well. And I find I enjoy this series because it was easy for people to jump in because they didn't have to. It was easier to follow. Now, not to say it wasn't deep. I mean, there was stuff that for us. I mean, we broke this thing down to the nth degree, right? And there's lots of deep cuts and all kinds of other stuff going on. But from a simple narrative, I think it worked really well for people to kind of jump in.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, who expected that we got a prison break in Star Wars isn't necessarily surprising, but that we spent 3 episodes doing it, or 3+ episodes really developing these characters and, for something so tragic to really behold Kino Loy's character, right? Some of the things we talked about there. I think those are the surprising aspects of it, to where you actually feel invested. And it's not a gimme episode of like, well, we got in there and literally 1 episode later we're breaking them out. and
Yeah.
there's no lesson learned. It doesn't feel like you had anything invested in there. You didn't feel the. I mean, it's really interesting watching this, because when you look at Andor, the character, and he's in the prison, it's almost like he's into it, right? And you kind of understand why, like Kino Loy, why they're almost okay with his life, right? It keeps them motivated. It keeps them knowing that they've got something to live for. The Empire has got them on the mouse wheel, right?
Yeah.
And they're happy. They're happy spinning the wheel of the cage, in the cage, and to keep the machine running with this carrot dangling that they'll eventually get out. But you start to see that wear over time, and especially when you had Uli, and the way that he goes down, and the way that everybody starts to understand what is actually happening. I mean, those moments right there, you have to have all of that stuff for the prison break to actually mean something later on, rather than just a bunch of people not being thrown in jail erroneously, and most likely in a BS kind of way.
Mm-hmm.
But for them to finally, for them to really pent up all that aggression and finally mean something, and to have it really centralized on a character that was, just an old man effectively, but to see him whittle away over the course of a few episodes is just all the more impactful. And so that we got the Star Wars prison break isn't necessarily surprising, but that it was a deep prison break. And like you said, some of the most amazing writing I think we've ever had in Star Wars, and to have like no less than 3 or 4 epic speeches.
Yeah.
I mean, who would have thought
Yeah.
it? I mean, when we talked about award caliber and award worthy performances and writing, and like from top to bottom about this show, it's not hyperbole. It's not just blowing steam that we love Star Wars. Like, this stuff is really, really good, really
Right.
good.
Yeah.
And I would put up there with. I mean, I've been watching. So I've been sick for the last couple of weeks because the flu sucks. And I started watching House of the Dragon, and a lot of people love House of the Dragon. I got to be honest, I'm kind of bored because I'm comparing it with Andor the entire time, and I'm like, man, Andor is way more exciting than this. Andor had a lot more payoff than this. I don't feel like I'm lost half the time with Andor. Even if I didn't know Star Wars, I feel like I could jump into Andor. And like you were saying before, I don't feel lost. I feel like I'm right there with the characters, and they're taking me on this journey with them. And I feel like we're all kind of part of that movement at the same time.
Yeah. One last thing I kind of want to mention is what I enjoyed most. I do enjoy getting the backstory, more of an origin story from about the rebellion. I think we take it for granted because we started with episode 4 and the rebellion was already established and we were just kind of thrown into it, that getting to see those inner workings and how it came to be and how difficult it was, and it was a hot mess, and it really, a lot of it was desperate in terms of where everybody was, and all of this is in season 1. I think we're going to still see some of that in season 2, right? I don't think they're going to have their crap together, but not 100%. But getting to see that, it adds another layer to Star Wars in general, especially during this time and during this era, both for the rebellion and the Empire, right? And we got to see the inner workings of the Empire, which is something I've always been intrigued by and always wanted to know more about from a canon perspective. So we got that in spades. I mean, we saw some of the worst of the Empire, and we actually got to see some people that, for at least for a bit of time, we were rooting for on the Empire. I mean, like I said, hell, I even bought this stinking hat that I'm wearing today. So from that regard, I felt like they gave us a really good backstory on both of those, and it really boggles me that people are saying that this is not a series they could go back to. Like me, I wouldn't really go back to it. I wouldn't really watch it. There wasn't a whole lot there. And I'm thinking, man, did we watch the same series? Because
Right.
there's so many lines, quotes. Like I watched the entire series ahead of this episode tonight. I watched the entire series back to forth, and I thought, holy bananas, we need to go back and like write down some of the quotes that they say, right? Because the writing's that good, but also just it parallels so many things in Star Wars. Whether it was intentional or not, I don't know. But every time I hear these quotes, I'm thinking, oh, that's this instance, or that's when this happened, or that, right? And from different timelines all over Star Wars. And then the last that what you said also, these speeches that we get, right? And Luthen's speech in particular about what it means to give your life for the rebellion. What do you sacrifice as part of this for the better, for the the greater good or the entire galaxy? It's super powerful, and I think it really recontextualizes a lot of what we know about Mon Mothma, Princess Leia, Bail Organa, all of these pioneers of the rebellion. I think they would all give that same speech. So from that perspective, I mean, it's so enriching, right, for the story and specifically the rebellion. But uh, yeah, I don't understand why anyone could go through this series as a huge Star Wars fan or somebody that was, as close to it as we are, and walk away thinking, well, that's kind of one and done, never going back to that. I mean, no, this is a well, man. There's a lot here. We've only tapped the surface so far.
Right. And so just to give people a quick reminder, and we'll talk about this throughout the show. We won't do it specifically right now. There were two things that we wanted to focus on coming into the series that we said would make it and break it, right? So we felt like it had to really get the nature of Rogue One. It had to bring that in. It had to feel gritty. It had to feel like you had something at stake, I think is kind of what we were trying to say. The characters needed to feel like they were at risk. They needed to feel like they were getting somewhere that we cared, and that they were moving everything forward to a destination we knew was coming, but it didn't bore us in the process. Now, the part that I was concerned about that would really make or break the show would be the political atmosphere of it all. So was spending time on Coruscant going to belabor the point? Was it going to be boring? Did we care? Did we, all of those things? Was it going to deliver on that front to give us truly a great character view of Mon Mothma? And I think there's a lot more to come in that space, but we'll talk a little bit about that too. But those were the two primary components that at least I know coming into it, those were the two on my mind about what is going to help this show or hurt this show.
Mm-hmm.
And thankfully, just at a high level, thankfully, both of them really delivered in spades. I don't have any complaints about either one of them. And actually, the political stuff, way better than anything I could have come up with. I mean, that's not surprising. And that's just kind of silly, but seriously, just way better than what I would have expected. Just way better than I would have expected.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's a resounding, unequivocally yes that we got both of those. They landed both of those things just right. The grittiness was there. I mean, there was a sense of dread, sense of threat. We talked in the show as we were kind of going through the episodes about the shadow of the Empire and just the overreach of the Empire and how much tyranny they were exercising and just the way they were closing that proverbial hand. All of that was there, and then I felt like the politics was great. Like that was the one thing that I said I was really worried about. Like I didn't really want to get into how a bill is passed in the Senate, and we didn't get there. Although they did talk about it at one point, I thought, oh my God, they're really going to get into how this works.
Well, it was almost tongue in cheek, right? We talked about this during those episodes when Mon Mothma giving these really flat speeches, and you can basically hear the people coughing in the background and shutting the lights off, and completely disrespecting her in the process. But it was so important that you had that awkward moment of it, even though you're like, wow, this is not exciting at all. But it's so important to set the stage for what she's going through.
Yeah.
To make all of the other items, again, everything has to build off of that. And it all fits.
Yeah, I would agree. One question that came up here is, and I haven't seen this, but there were times when I was watching it during the series, I kind of asked myself, and I don't believe this, but I just want your thoughts on it. Did you ever feel like at any point this series was less about Andor and more about everything else? Everyone else, like other people, specifically, and I want to bring up like Mon Mothma. I know you had some issues with Cyril, and where the heck is that story even going? Why do we keep going back to that character? And I think in the end, I think we got a payoff. I won't say it was the biggest payoff. I think that's still to be determined in season 2. I think he's kind of playing a longer game here in terms of, the payoff with Cyril's narrative. But what did you think about that? Do you feel like at any point that Andor gets,
overshadowed,
upstaged in some way?
Well, and oddly enough, Fiona Shaw, of course, was on record, I think early on, that says you're going to wonder which Andor they're actually talking about in the title.
I didn't hear that.
Man. Oh yeah. She's like, this guy should be about Marva Andor. And you can maybe make an argument for that. I don't know if this is the strongest one. I think what's important about this, and so it's difficult to bring the Mon Mothma side directly to Andor because they haven't had any kind of direct relationship or conversation or interaction. They've not met. Same with Dedramiro, there's a lot of that, but it gives you context around everything of what the character is experiencing. You have to set the broader stage about what the Empire and what the effect of the Empire is on a bigger scope than just Andor or just Ferrix. And so all of the things that feed into Andor, all of these things make up this character. all of these things and all of these people, all of these different experiences that they're going through in the challenge. So Bix is a great example. Yeah, Bix and Andor haven't interacted a whole lot, throughout the series once he leaves, right? But
Right.
she is going through torture, literally, because of Andor. And her hope and her faith and her, what Andor is going to learn from what she is what she's going through and what she's suffering through impact his character. Not his character as Andor, but his actual character.
Right.
Like his being. And so I think a lot of those are all they're cumulative, they're additive. They're not necessarily direct influences on him, but the things around him that, I mean, even Luthen, right? I think Luthen's another great example, to the point where they're like, well, no, we have to take him off the board because we don't know we can trust him. But those interactions that they've had and that pressure and him, the realization of some of that, he being Andor, matter into his final decision about how he even approaches, how am I going to present my final choice basically to Luthen at the very end of the series, or at the very end of the season rather. So
Yeah.
I think they're all super important to the story in order for you to get a better appreciation of what Andor, what Cassian Andor's journey has been throughout the season and where he started. And without all of that, I feel like you would be severely shortchanged. But I guess I understand where they're coming from, though, about why they might see that. But you have to view it as a total story. And quite honestly, if I'm just with Andor all the time, I'm probably kind of bored.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it needs to be more. I would agree. And just like you said, I mean, the one that's probably the character that's probably the most removed physically from Andor is Mon Mothma. And
Sure.
then the two things I would say to that is, one, if Genevieve O'Reilly wasn't in that role, and I don't want to shortchange any other actresses, right? But my goodness, she's so captivating when she's on screen that you don't even think about that, right? Never crossed my thought. Like, why are we seeing all this stuff with Mon Mothma? Keep it down, boy.
She's my girl.
But yeah, I know. But she's so amazing. My goodness. I mean, the way that she just holds on certain lines and her facial expressions, and we've already, I mean, I can
Oh
go
gosh,
on and
the
on with
quivering in her voice when it comes to her daughter and
yeah.
the pain and what she's experienced with parent. I mean, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So the performance aside, to your point though, she is, whether she doesn't realize it, but she is directly impacted by Andor, right? A lot of why that, the box is closing in on her is because of Andor's actions, technically Luthen's actions, however it is Andor. So
Right.
in that regard, she is connected, right? It's all kind of upstream, downstream, pulling of strings. This stuff moves over here. I mean, we get all that. What I would say to anybody that's still kind of on the fence about whether or not Andor, took a backstage to some of these characters or some of the storylines, I would say look at it the way we approach this particular season. Because I wanted, and this is going to kind of segue into what we felt like didn't work or didn't land for us in some ways. But when you look at this series as a whole, right, this season as a whole, it's probably not fair to just take a particular episode, right, and say, well, this episode didn't work. You do have to look at it holistically because all of it, like you said, is all connected. Right? There's in so many different ways it's all connected. And what I would say with characters for like Cyril, Dedra to some extent, Mon Mothma, although they didn't have those physical interactions or as many. I think where you have to kind of take this series, given the complexity of the writing that's happening here, you kind of have to take both of these seasons. Like, I don't think it's fair to really answer that question until we get to the end of season 2, because I think that's where that payoff is going to be. So, what I'm saying is don't look at it from, just one episode or one particular arc. Wait till the whole series is over and see if it does make sense. And maybe it doesn't at that point for them too, and that's fine.
I
But I
think
think
that's a
that's where
great
it's
point,
really
though. I mean,
yeah,
we've stressed so much you have to see the season, that with these characters, you're going to have to see the series. So I think
yeah,
it's very important for us to make sure that we keep our own expectations in check, even though we want to say, well, they gave us 12 episodes and Cyril's still just a Cocoa Pebbles, or not Cocoa Pebbles, but what is it? Oops, all berries, eating lazy guy, or something like that.
mhm,
But again, we have another 12 where presumably he's going to have a very different role, and it will feel more rewarding knowing some of the things that he went through in this first season, and they will feel more impactful later on, or we'll just be better off for knowing it. I think is what some of I've had to go kind of revisit some of this. I'm just better off for knowing some of the things that happen behind it. It's just that much more enriching knowing some of the things that happened in the first couple of episodes, knowing a little bit of the backstory with Nemec, even though we didn't get a lot with Cinta, knowing, her place in it and why is it so important that she's against the Empire on this? Like, what's her stake in the game?
Yeah. So we've been going on and on about and gushing about Andor now. But for you, like, is there anything that didn't work? Is there anything that didn't stick the landing? Small,
Yeah, Cyril
large,
sucks.
whatever it may be.
Cyril, yeah, Cyril. I mean, again, I have to keep myself in check. I want to know where he ends up going with it. I didn't really like the shipping aspect of it at the very end of the last episode, of course. Where what did Dejamira? We've kind of taken that character, and it feels like we've done something a little different with her. But I have to have faith and confidence and trust in Tony Gilroy and company, because they've not led us astray really at all. But if I were to be critical about a couple of things, I think editing for me, while sometimes was absolutely brilliant, I think in the first half of the series, in particular, the first half of the season, left something to be desired. And I think throughout it came up enough to where I think maybe not the strongest piece, or at least maybe it felt jarring for me at times. We would flash away, and then we'd only be in the scene for just a few minutes. And so it felt very abrupt. And then we move on to something else. And Cyril, I think, unfortunately, is associated with a lot of that, because some of those moments were just so jarring, and we just see him at home with mom eating cereal, getting beat up on, and then we're done with that, and we don't really come back to it. And it didn't, like, what did it play into that story? So if I were to be critical, that was probably the one thing I kept coming back to throughout the 12 episodes that bothered me a little bit. I think the music, again, was very different. And so I'm trying to still reconcile if I like it. Like, I think sometimes it worked super, super well, especially like the very Blade Runner vibes at the very beginning. I actually quite liked. I thought that was really refreshing and different. But then there were a couple moments like the drums, and the crazy like cymbals and everything else that just like, where the hell is this coming from? Like, it just felt a little out of place. But then you have moments like the episode finale. So again, that consistency, is it always there? Does it feel like it's one big connected work? And I think generally, yes, it does. But there were moments in there that were like, what? Like, what, wait, what? And I think some of that, but overall, very positive. Still just moments where I'm left kind of scratching my head. But were there any real gotcha moments in there that you're like,
Well, so my thoughts on, I guess, some of that real quick. I totally get what you're saying. I don't know if I feel that way, but you're not the first person that said that, and I think it's fair. Um, the the that whole storyline between them, or with him, and there's just moments of there where it's like we're spying on a really awkward conversation happening between a woman and a mother and her you know 20 something 30 something year old son who's still living with her, right? I mean,
right.
all of that was really uncomfortable to watch at times. And I mean, the payoff was, I think it's still, again, I think a lot of it's still to be determined, because in my head, and we'll get to this later, is, where do they go? I mean, I think he and Deidre and Mosk are a trio now. I think they're going to be a team of some way. They've come together by the time we get to season 2, right? That's my hope, anyways. Because then we get, okay, well, then he had to go through hell, literal hell, to get to where he's at and to redeem himself, and et cetera, et cetera. But I do understand that. I think on the music part, I know Gina talked about the Niamos music. I mean, that was great stuff. I love that music. I thought it was fantastic. And I know we've given the cymbals and the drums a hard time. I think we bring it up just about every episode. But even when I was in my rewatch, I watched it. I was like, "Oh God, what the heck's going on here?" It's a little harsh for Star Wars. I think I get what he was trying to do. Right, he was kind of very like,
Yeah.
there was a lot of determination, right? And so it was the drum, the I don't know, the beats of determination or whatever it is.
Right.
I get it, but it was just a little harsh for me. But the music really was fine. I thought overall the music was great, with the exception of that one little hiccup there. Um, so as far as the only thing that I would say still bothers me was, and it worked to our benefit. This is the really tricky part. We do this show every week, and the fact that they released it weekly gives us so much time to sit here and talk about it, have these conversations. And I love that aspect. I love that water cooler talk that's happening at work with your personal friends online, these shows, etc. All of that's great stuff. And I love it because heralds back to like the old time before the days of the internet, right?
Right.
Everybody on there watch it and we'd all talk about it for a full week. And then the next episode came out. That's just how television worked. Where I felt like this was the downside was that even watching these, like if you watch the whole series through, it makes sense. But as we were watching it week to week, the way some of these episodes ended is still kind of bizarre. And I don't really, for me, I just don't understand why I get there might have been some pragmatic reason as to why they had to end the episode there because they start bleeding into the next story arc and it kind of leaves I get it. There's probably some tough choices, but for me, this is actually a series that I think probably would have worked well if they just released the whole stinking thing and said, here's all 12 episodes, go watch them. But I don't know that this show, we would have had a very different breakdown and different kind of show if they had done that. So thank you for doing that, Disney. I appreciate it.
Right.
Does that make sense?
No, it does quite a bit. And because, and again, it's the conversations that we had and that we've shared with our audience here is that we had conversations with people after episodes 4, 5, and 6 with our friends, with our work friends, with other people around us who have said, well, it wasn't really for me. And our feedback to them was like, you need to go back and pick it back up.
Mm-hmm.
Because where it has gone, but I think that also tells you, it kind of highlights what you're saying though, is that some of those storylines may have been a little bit slow, I think, to get started, or they were very deliberate. I don't like to say slow, but they were very deliberate, right? And the way that they ended off kind of felt like maybe the show didn't have as much direction as people would have expected in a traditional way. But I think some of this is also breaking the mold a little bit about and we know Tony Gilroy, this is him to a T, no pun intended. But this is him to a T about breaking the mold about what it is our expectations are and subverting those expectations about how a TV show should be made, how the writing should be done, how the filming, all these things, he doesn't care. He's like, I'm going to tell this story.
Yep.
I'm going to tell this story and this is the way it's going to work. I'm with you. I think, could they have been structured just a teeny tiny bit differently to help with that retention side rather than have people go back and revisit it? But I think the important thing is that people did go back and revisit it. Word of mouth is still a very important, positive or negative piece of feedback for people to go do it. You just got to people just have to go do it. But once you lose them, it's really hard to get them back. And I think that's the part that could be really frustrating if you don't. And again, I put that back to editing. Not to harp on it, but to me, those are editing decisions that get made that, are they fitting the narrative you're wanting to make? Great, cool. But also we're making television that has to be captivating and make sure that people feel invested and that they can keep coming back for more. So they can get that payoff. But how do you tell them, hey, stick with us, we're getting there, right? And that's a challenge. That also goes back to writing, I think, too. But so anyway, it was a delicate balance. But I think if you stuck around till 3, for 4 or 5, and you revisit back to that, you were probably hooked. Because then you knew what to expect. But after those first 2, 3 episodes, it was a different way, a different approach for us, right? And so for some people, that was a little more difficult when they didn't have that hanging, that carrot dangling in front of them to say, hey, make sure you tune in next week because we're going to do this thing.
No. Yep. Yeah. I agree. I sign off on all that stuff. Okay, so let's move into it. Maybe a little a lighter piece here. I want to talk about the Easter eggs, the cameos, and guest appearances. So we on that final hype episode, and I did listen to that today too, because I was like, what were we trying to predict here? But I want to get your thoughts on this because we threw out a lot of them out there. We said no Jar Jar Binks, no Baron. We talked about maybe like a Baron Papa Noida, the Syndulas, Bail Organa. I think he had brought up Vader and Palpatine, possibly as people that we could have. We talked about anybody from the Clone Wars series, Krennic. We talked about Krennic, Galen, Urso, K2SO, but we said they were likely to be season 2, and I think we were spot on. I think those are likely characters that we'll see in season 2.
Right.
Bad Batch characters, Yaddle, thanks Steph, no thanks Steph. That was her choice. And in the end, we got none of those, and that's fine because I don't think we were really crazy about any of them. But instead, we did get Wolf Yularen, and we got Saw Gerrera. We knew that going in, Saw Gerrera.
Right.
2 tubes, we kind of knew that from the trailer. We got a Melshi, who that was one that we did not suspect. We can talk about him. We mentioned we talked about it would be cool if there was a name drop, and I think we got one with Sly Moore, although that is a deeper cut. Like I don't
Agreed.
your average Star Wars fan is not going to know who the heck Sly Moore is.
Right.
And then of course there were all of the antiquities in Luthen's shop, right? Tons of Easter eggs there that were there, but they really, didn't have any impact on the story, which was great.
Yeah, they were kind of your
Um,
typical Easter eggs, your traditional Easter eggs of
yeah.
cool things in the background to go and nitpick.
And then to our buddy Chef Chris, sadly, no Gotals. So I know we were both banking on that, bud, but it didn't happen, man. So maybe season 2 they'll pick it up. We'll see.
Well, and not a lot of aliens in general. Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's a story for another time. But what did you think about what do you think about the characters that we did get, or just the cameos? I think what if I could summarize, I think we were for it, but didn't feel like it would really. This series doesn't necessarily lend itself to those kind of things. That's more like a Mando Boba Fett kind of you know thing, if you will.
Agreed. I think the one, well, yes, I think there were two. I like the way they did them, and I like that we introduced characters and we developed characters, and we spent that time developing characters rather than name dropping people and feeling like we got to go, fill in the gaps. And it was a character of the week type of drop, right? And then, so I'm glad we got away from that. Cool. Wolfie Lauren made sense to have in there. The depiction of the character, though, I think is the one that felt a little bit inconsistent with how we've seen him in the past, right? I think
True. Yep.
so I think that was one of the, if I had to call it a miss, I think he's probably the only miss that I would have in there. Saw Gerrera, of course, was expected. I wouldn't really even call that, anything special about that. He's central to this part of the story. He's central to Rogue One. So for him to be involved makes a lot of sense. Two Tubes being his right hand tube is really important. Makes a lot of sense.
Tube.
I think
I would consider them guest appearances, and they're not cameos, right? I mean, they're actually
true. Yeah, the recurring characters, right?
right.
Melshi, I agree with you. I think that was a really good one, though. I think that was one that was unexpected. Like, wait, hold on, we know this guy. Like, who is this guy? And it really took everybody about an episode for it to really kind of catch on. They're like, oh, that's really who it was, right? And we all kind of realize this. I think the missed opportunity, though, was Sly Moore. And I'm hoping that maybe, well, and maybe more of a generalized standpoint was in the political arena.
Right.
Like putting more pressure on Mon Mothma, and who are other characters that you can do that to bridge that if you want to bridge more with A New Hope or with some of the things that they've done in the comic books, which again aren't critical or vital and not necessarily Tony Gilroy's way of doing things anyway. But if you want that, Sly Moore is a character, for them to name drop made a lot of sense. And I was really excited. I think that's a really good, even if it's just a name drop, I think it was perfect because Sly Moore's mere presence is a huge threat. And I just don't, I think that this is the missed opportunity is that I don't know how well people realize just how important of a character Sly Moore is to the Emperor and how integrated that character is and being force sensitive and things like that. So it does feel like a deeper cut, which you and I enjoy and think that's really cool, but also like, man, there's people you don't understand. Like, that's not good. Like they
right.
It's not good. They can't be there.
They're in the same room. That's not going to end well. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. So I think that's maybe the one that I wish that we would come back and revisit. And I think there's still a lot of opportunity for that because we know Mon Mothma's journey has a lot of runway. There's a lot of things that are going to happen, and she is going to be central in second season, especially when we get to speculating here. We'll kind of share what we know about it so far, and you'll understand very clearly why Mon Mothma is going to take center stage.
Yep. I would agree. Like those particular, all of the cameos / guest appearances, whatever it is, I think they all worked really well. Like it never took away from the series. And after the first couple episodes, I stopped looking for them. Like if it happened, it happened. That's fine.
We didn't need them to the point
we
where
didn't need them.
We didn't even want them. Yeah.
Yeah. I was as a, but at the same time, like it's a very different series too. Like this is not Mandalorian. It's not Book of Boba Fett. When I watch those, or I watch even Bad Batch or Clone Wars, like I'm anticipating who that's going to be, and that to me, that's just part of that series and part of that show. And this was very different. It was a very different approach, and I think that's what I think there's a lot to be said there, right? Because if you start doing that, unless you're telling the Mando story in the way they tell it, or telling Book of Boba Fett the way they told it, which is not what the series did. I think you are going to lose people with going with like deep cuts and Wolf Yularen, for example. My theory. I'm not saying this is anywhere documented, but my theory is he just simply wrote. There's a high end ISB officer that comes in and gives a speech, and somebody from the story group goes, or you'd be great for that. Throw this guy in there.
Right.
Okay, sure.
But just do it in the captions. Don't worry about naming him in the show.
Right. Don't give him the name. Right. We'll throw it in the captions and let people,
That's how
chew down on it.
cameos usually work, right?
Yeah. But I mean, that's red meat for us. We'll talk about and dissect it all day. Same thing with Sly
Sure.
Moore. Like I need a character name when I'm writing this, and it's got to be somebody that's close to the Emperor, somebody that's very threatening. You know who would be the perfect person? Just put Sly Moore in there, right?
Right.
And I'm not taking anything away from Gilroy because Gilroy's already said it. He's not doing a podcast, guys, like we are, right? He's out writing the story. He's a fan of Star Wars. He knows what's going on. He's part of Rogue One, right? He gets the overall story, but he's not 10 layers deep into the holocron, so he's getting these names from folks, and I think we're better for it. So I really enjoyed the approach they took with these characters. It wasn't in your face, and I think it made sense with the tone of this series to not go so deep. Now that said, I think season 2 may be a little bit different, right? Because now we're in the midst of the rebellion. We know there's going to be, well, I'm assuming there's going to be Mon Mothma interaction, Bail Organa interaction, maybe even like a Princess Leia. We talked about Jyn Erso. All these characters are very active in this space that Cassian Andor is going to be in when we get it a year later. So I expect them to be there, although I still don't expect them to be so overt. Like it shouldn't be like a surprise kind of thing. And then that's all we talk about for the rest of the week. I think he's going to do the smart and do it the right way where it makes sense and it's going to feel natural to the storyline to have these characters show up.
Exactly. I think it'll start to feel more connected to, again, the Rogue One aspect, or even the Rebels, like what we start to see in Rebels. I think it'll start to take on elements of those as we move forward. But yeah.
So, okay. Before we get into, well, I got a couple more things here. Kind of recapping the series. We talked about the Razor Crest moments, right? And for anybody that didn't listen to that show or doesn't know what the heck we're talking about, the Razor Crest moment is kind of like in a series when there's just something that's crazy, should not be predicted, but then gets predicted. It's just something that you weren't really expecting, I guess. It happens. And I think we kept it pretty light. You had said that Luthen would die. I'm sorry, Jonesy. I don't mean to bring it up, but we have to talk about it. Yeah, Luthen would die. You said Saw Gerrera loses his leg. And then I was looking for kind of like a double cross or a double cross, given that we were getting into this kind of, I don't know, at the time we were talking like Born Identity, espionage, right? Can't really trust anybody kind of thing. I don't know that any of those, well, I know that the Last Student Country, but even like the double cross, like I really had a hard time reconciling that one.
Yeah, there were circumstances, right? I mean, she was tortured. So I think from the traditional Razor Crest moment that we've seen in others, again, it didn't happen. There wasn't one, I think, to an extent, right? I think there were surprising moments or paths that, like, did they really just go down this path? But it wasn't necessarily something that was just pivotal and completely turned everything on head. Like, what? Like, no, or anything like that. I think there were moments of, so positioning Lita to be, potentially wed off. Would I call that a Razor Crest moment? No. Was it a moment of like, ooh, wow, yeah,
unexpected? Oh yeah,
yeah, absolutely. Important to the story, absolutely. But there was nothing really, even the prison break or Aldani or things like that, right? Were not necessarily any of those Razor Crest moments. And again, we did have a bit of a Death Watch list going, so we'll talk a little bit about that and kind of where we had hits and misses. But I think overall, and I think that's okay. And I think that's the point, right? With Tony Gilroy, it's a burn. It's not about those one-off moments. Now, should we have one before the end of the series? I think potentially, yes. I think there's still room and opportunity for one to happen. We still have Rogue One, so it's difficult it's difficult. You can't get too far ahead of yourself and do something too astronomical, right?
Yeah.
But I think,
I would agree.
I think there's still some room in there that you can do a lot of things because we know what we know the vibe of what season 2 is going to bring us. But yeah, I just don't think we had a Razor Crest moment. And
no, we didn't.
I didn't miss it, to be honest with you. It didn't.
And to be fair, like my prediction, I guess my Razor Crest moment was going to be somebody that, not to verbatim say what I said, but someone close to Andor was going to betray him, like really build, like he would have all his trust built into them and that person would turn on him.
Okay.
And there are two people that really kind of turn on him, right? I mean, Lauren's bringing up one right now. She says, what's the dude's name that wanted to take the money and leave? Does that count as a double cross? The guy that Cassian shot?
Right. Yeah. Skeen.
Skeen. Yeah. Yeah, I think that, I mean, it counts, but did he really have, he never trusted that guy. I mean, he kind of came around towards the very end, but it wasn't somebody, I was thinking more like a Marva or I specifically said somebody like Bix, right?
Right.
Luthen was another one that I brought up. And Luthen, although I guess he kind of betrayed him, not really though, because it was like he did build the trust in him, right? He said, "You're my dude. I want you. I came here for you. I didn't come here for that stupid whatever thing was, right?
Right.
You're my guy." And Andor's like, "Wow, okay, thanks. I really appreciate that. Let me go do this mission for you." And then after the mission, he's like, "Oh, we got to kill him."
I don't think that's quite how that went down, but okay. Yep.
I know, but and then Luthen's like, well, in his mind, he's like, well, crap, I had a moment of weakness, right? I exposed myself, and Clea was like, you got to clean this up. You're getting sloppy, and so then they go after and kill him. And so from that regard, I think he probably was betrayed. Although he didn't really know that either, right? I mean, he kind of probably sensed it. Andor, towards the very end there, we kind of suspected that. It was never explicitly said, but beyond that, no, I would say even that kind of falls in that category, but not really, not to the extent of what I was thinking. Either there'd be this like clear cliche, haha, the gun's on you now. I've been working for them all along.
Right.
The inverse of this was like Lonnie, although that was really not, you know what I mean? Like Lonnie was somebody we did not suspect. Interesting enough, by the way, when you watch the series again, watch Lonnie's facial, his face now in those early episodes when he's talking about stuff, and you know that he knows, and he's working on the inside or for the other guys. It's crazy.
That's the thing. Like people saying there's no rewatchability to some of this. I just completely disagree, because you have to, like, when you know these little bits about these characters, there's so much more going on.
Yeah.
And quite honestly, we're going to look into a lot more too, because that's what we do, but still.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Well, that's fine. Like did the show need it? No. Like, I mean, we already said it's pretty dang incredible, so it didn't need to have it. So,
were you a little bit?
Here's the question.
So I was a little bit surprised that Luthen didn't die at the end of it. I think that, but again, maybe that's, we've been conditioned a certain way to expect events like that, right? Someone has to die. Someone important has to die. There has to be meaning. It has to be something, going out with a blaze of glory, type of thing, or something that people feel really
short, though. Don't cut yourself too short, because you did say in that episode that Marva would die.
Yeah.
Like you said, Marva has to die because you said somebody like Marva has to pass to kind of give him the edge that he needs.
That final shove.
So,
yeah.
Right. So you got that right.
Kind of,
But go on about Luthen. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No. Yeah. I mean, it was, we're kind of conditioned to have those types of moments, though, I think. And that we didn't need it, I think is, and again, it is pretty impressive, actually.
Yeah. So, so I had this question here, and we don't have to spend a lot of time on it, but who were the winner and losers in the series? And when I say that, I mean, we can talk about the characters all day, which we're going to talk about at some point here in the show tonight, I think, maybe. But, looking at the big groups, the Senate, the Empire, the Rebellion, like who won in this series and who lost in this series? At least season 1.
And that depends on your point of view, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Because the Empire's they were feeling pretty good about Anto Krieger. So they feel like they won that one.
Sure. And
they quieted things. They gave the Emperor their kind of their moment. But then they had a complete disaster happen on Ferric. So I think I don't know that I call it a rebellion. There's really still not a rebellion, right? I mean, and that's been, I think this series really made that very clear. This season made that extremely clear. There is not really a rebellion. We can keep saying there is a rebellion. It is a rebellion in lowercase r.
Yes, I would agree 100% on that.
It's not an organized thing type of yet. And again, we know season 1 was about getting Andor to the place where he is a rebel, right? And he's committed to the cause. That was the point of season 1. So I think from a rebellion standpoint, I think the rebellion was a winner because they had a small win, Aldhani. They showed they could actually pull some things off. They know they can now have financial contributions behind them. They have also lost. Mon Mothma is feeling like the screws are being put to her in a lot of different ways, in a way she didn't expect, and the cost to her is great. So I think I don't know that there's any real clear winner. I mean, the Empire has lost to an extent. their empire, their Death Star project is, suffered at least a small setback, with what happened on the prison and on Arcana 5. So that anybody clearly feels like a clear winner or loser, I think there are points for and against all of those arguments, I guess.
Yeah, I think the only real losers here are the Senate.
I think the only real winner here is probably Luthen, to be honest with you.
Yeah, well, and
he was losing he was losing throughout some of the series, but at the end of the day, I think at the end of the season, Luthen,
he won because he's got Andor fully committed now. He's in. The cause has begun,
and he's got cash, right? And he's got Mon Mothma doing her thing now. She's making concessions too. So Luthen's world kind of righted, I guess. So if you're looking for a winner, yeah, kind of thinking Luthen ended up on top of. I did not expect to say that, actually, to be totally honest with you.
Yeah. Well, yeah. But yeah, I mean, the Senate, it was interesting to see them. I would consider them losers. I mean, we saw firsthand that thing that's just falling apart, right? They're losing their power, and it's just a matter of time before the Emperor comes and just dissolves it all and says, you're done.
But they're okay with it. That's the sad part.
Yeah.
They don't even know they're losing.
I think some of them are, right? I mean, we know there are some that are not, but I think by and large, I think a lot are because they're getting pockets filled, right? I mean, they're getting paid off in different ways. We saw that small little get together at one of the parties, right? Where they're kind of talking about, there's almost,
right.
I mean, there's almost empathy for the Empire, right? Like, I think Mothma, one of them tells Mothma like that she's trying to stop the Empire or the Emperor from ruling the Empire or something to that effect,
Right.
As though it were like just the dumbest idea ever. Why would you want to do that? They're taking care of us, kind of thing. I think the Empire probably does feel like they did win, especially at the very end with Anton Krieger. We'll see how that's going to turn out. I mean, there's a lot that's still to be said and done with the Empire, especially there on Ferrix. Like, what happens there?
Yeah, I'm really curious how they come back and view the events of Ferrix.
Yeah.
I mean, because Aldhani was a clear loss as well, and that resonated through the galaxy. What is the impact of Ferrix? Do people even notice?
Yeah. With the year time gap, I think it's going to be hard to really say whether or not these were winners or losers either. It just depends on how they tell the story. But I think overall the rebellion is in a good position. And I'm with you. Like, I know why they kept calling it the rebellion, because people need to, I mean, that's what we know it as. A lot of folks just commonly know it as that. But I think they did a really great job. And again, I don't know if it was intentional or not, but when we get Nimic's speech in that last episode where he says random acts of insurrection are occurring constantly throughout the galaxy, that's what's happening here. It's not a rebellion. These are just random acts. We had a random act of insurrection on Ferrix, and like we're going to have a random act of insurrection over on Belsavis or wherever it is. You name it, right? It's not into that moment, and I know we're beating a dead horse here, but it's not into that moment in Rebels when Mon Mothma calls them all together and says, we are a rebellion, that they are just galvanized and, they've coalesced to that point. But we're seeing that. I think that's fair.
And I think Nemec's speech is really important because, again, whether people recognize it or not, they've enlisted in the cause, is what he's saying in there too, right?
Yeah.
And so while you don't know that you're part of it, it is coming together. I think, and that's what I'm hearing from you a little bit here. It is, you can see it's coalescing. And I think that's what we will see. I think even early on in season 2, I think this is something that we will see. It will start to feel like it's coming together, but there's just things holding it back, right? How do you actually make it do? And then you're right, until we actually get Rebels and someone front and center comes out and says what they believe, calls the Emperor out, and say, this is what we are, and we have buy-in from people, and we have commitment. But again, there's a long road to get there still.
Yeah.
And we're going to get that with season 2, which is actually kind of exciting. I'm pretty interested to see how they pull that off. But
let's talk about Death Watch, which was the last piece that we talked about in our final hype episode. We talked about, who was going to die, who was going to live. We didn't know a lot of the characters. I mean, it was kind of an unfair question to ask, but now we know.
Right.
So in total, we got Marva, we got Tim in there, Terramin. We've got Nimic, we've got Gorn, Skeen, Ulaf. Sorry, Lauren. And then Kino. I'm kidding. I'm just kidding, Jonesy. I know.
He's
Kino
alive.
Loy. He's alive. But well, how did you feel about the characters that did die? Because I think the way I would summarize maybe your feelings in that episode, like that last episode, was that we had a lot of people live, and I think I was surprised. Like, I did not. Maybe it was because it was Rogue One and everybody died in that movie. I
Right.
was surprised by the number of characters that made it, and the characters that did pass, with the exception of Marva, they were all characters that were introduced to us in, 1, 2, 3 episodes at most. And make sure I got that right. Yeah, all these characters, 1, 2, 3 episodes. That's it.
And
So
you know
we didn't really
what was
get
really
to know them
crazy?
very well.
Yeah, and they said that we were carrying forward like 30 characters. I mean, there were 30 characters in this series so far. It felt like such a tight cast, but you're right. When you start listing them out, I'm looking at the list of names that died. I'm like, wow, that many people died? Really? It just kind of it didn't settle in. It was 8 people, in the first place. But I
Yeah,
think
and I didn't include like what was there was 2 guys on the
Zan,
Empire.
yeah, there was Zan that died. There was Corv, um,
Yes.
the others that we didn't know who they were. Or that we didn't know they're part of it, right?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, these are the characters that were, I guess, maybe probably just closest to Andor, right? The people that we felt like would help him become the person he did or would become,
Hmm.
which I think some of these did. But
Right,
again, they just weren't on screen very long.
right. But again, I think the people that died, I think there was important. There were important elements of why their characters were. It wasn't just about killing everybody off and starting over next season, right? And saying, okay, well, that arc is done. Now let's start the next one. I think that continuity, and again, we are building a rebellion in season 2. We are actually coalescing. We're forming something, and you can't kill everybody off and then go form them, right? Because then you got to go start over. And so it makes a lot of sense that we brought characters, back, and that we're going to do it. I think some characters, to me, they made a lot of sense, right? We talked about Marva. It was really important for her, for Andor to see that. So the things that we didn't anticipate at the beginning of the season were that she would become like this underground rebellion. Now we didn't really see it on screen, but we had an idea this is what exacerbated her health problems. Right. She felt like she was already kind of getting towards the end of things, and all of a sudden she's like, no, I'm gonna get involved. I've been inspired. I need to do this. And that Andor doesn't get to see it, kind of gets the feeling of gets to listen to his mother talk about it though. Was just so powerful in order to, well, I think by the point he comes back to Ferrex, I think he's kind of already there.
Yeah, I would
But
agree.
but what it does though is it reaffirms, and we said the same thing for Luthen and so many characters. What Marva is saying is just reaffirming everything that these characters know and believe. But now it's like you've almost got this permission that now you can really go in and commit yourself to this.
Mhm.
Like I agree with you, and it makes sense to those characters because of what they've gone through the previous 12 episodes. And so I think it was really important for some of those to go. Some characters like Tim, that was kind of your betrayal moment, I guess, that you were looking for.
Yeah, I hadn't really considered that one. Right.
Yeah. Again, not a character that we had a lot invested in, but we knew that there was a relationship with Bix. We knew there was a bit of a love triangle, so on and so forth. But you had a little bit of that there too. It makes sense of what they were trying to do. We also said Nurchi, right? He bid it when he was trying to betray.
He also betrayed him, but he seemed like he was more in it for the money.
Well, he was slime. Yeah, he was just in for it for himself. Yeah. So,
Right.
But again, characters, and again, we're not sure if we're coming back to Ferrex or not. We're kind of uncertain about what Ferrex's role looks like this in the future. But
Ooh, are we though?
well, I think I'm uncertain
No.
about where it's not going to be a base of operations, or will it? But
Well, that's the question. So the question that, remember at the very beginning, that Tony Gilroy question, I think it has to do with that. But we'll come back to it. Don't worry.
Okay, great. I look forward to it.
So I guess for the characters though, did it feel like too many, too less, just about right as far as those that died?
If we were to make a list of all the characters that we had, it's going to feel like a lot actually, but it never really felt too big, which I think is a testament of the way that they introduced characters and gave them time to mature and develop a little bit, to where it's a big cast, but I don't know that it felt overwhelming in any kind of way. I think actually they balanced it pretty well. And I looking at this list of who's gone and who we're carrying forward, I'm pretty all right with that. I think they made some interesting choices about who they're bringing forward, like Jezzy. A character that got brought up once or twice throughout the season, and all of a sudden she's the one piloting the ship, to get for the getaway for Brasso and Bix and company.
Mm-hmm.
But overall, I think I feel pretty good about where kind of where they landed across the board. Gave us enough of the characters we wanted, and we're going to stick with some of them. Yeah.
Believe it or not, if you go out to Wikipedia, they have a death count like who killed the most characters, like who killed the most people in the series. You wanna take a guess as to which character killed the most people in the series?
Individually, was it Andor? Was it
Yeah,
Cassian?
individually.
Yeah, because he killed what, 3?
No, it's not Andor.
Oh, it's not Andor. Oh,
No, he was second. I think like they had him like at 8 or 9 or something like that. Maybe I
oh,
don't
the
know.
prison. Yeah, the prison break. He took out several.
Yeah,
Okay, who was number 1?
it was Luthen. So I not we don't need to get into this, but I don't know if they're considering like the Tie Fighter, that battle, and I don't know. They had him at like some high number. I just thought it was funny that that someone's keeping track of how many like how many marks they got or whatever, death ticks, or I forget the term that's used. Anyways, okay. Um,
Now, some of the deaths and stuff we didn't get. B2, I thought was no way he survives this season.
yes, but we very, oh, what's the word? Morbidly said that B2 would then his like brains or something would get put into K2SO, or we said that maybe he has a carryover there in some way. So
Yeah, I don't think that'll happen now.
I know it would be kind of weird and funny at the same time.
Yeah,
But
but
yeah,
we
I
did
mean,
have some
all the
characters though.
characters.
Go ahead.
I was surprised. I guess if I had to summarize it, I was surprised that we didn't lose more. And again, I don't know if that's just because of Rogue One, or I was expecting there to be more death in his life that kind of spurred him to be the person that he was. Not, you don't have to have that, of course. I mean, look at Leia. I mean, you know, she lived a charmed life, but she was, not to
Well,
get
and if I
into
think about it from Cassian's perspective, if he were to lose more than Marvel, let's say he lost Brasso and he lost Bix, at some point,
Sends him on a different path.
Exactly. I think that's exactly right. I think that you start to say, okay, now you see more of that extreme nature come in, that extremism of like, well, I have nothing to live for.
Right.
And then you
Hey,
become
Saw.
Saw. But you have to keep his humanity because we want him to be better than Saw Gerrera. We want him to be better than Luthen too, right? Even though we know that Andor is going to be basically an assassin and a cold-blooded killer, and you could argue he kind of is, but he's more doing it in more of a survival mode right now. But you have to keep something of Marva alive in him, and you don't want to water that down. And you don't want to, it's a slippery slope. And he's already he's on the precipice of it anyway by the time we get to Rogue One. But you have to have something that says he can be pulled back from that, and that Jyn Erso, when she does it, that he didn't go too far down that path.
Yeah.
And so I think it was really important for those characters to stick around. And I think a character like Brasso in particular was way more important than I think people maybe give credit for, of being just, we had talked about in the last episode, like he's just this trunk, right? He's the tree, he's the steady,
the rock.
Yeah. The thing that everybody can lean on. I mean, he's a big dude in the first place, but nothing really rattles him though either. And I think for Cassian, I think that's how he always viewed Brasso as well. It was there was that stalwart there, and I think and to an extent, he viewed Marva that way too. But Brasso physically, fulfills that role too for him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you're right. I mean, Cassian, he couldn't have too much death, otherwise he would go down that path. And not to bring these up, but the fact that, and you actually were talking about this a little bit, but the fact that Clem, his dad, again, there's been a couple of different interpretations of that final speech that he has with him, as about the rust and discarding things. And for me, that was him reflecting on he was the old toy or whatever, and just people didn't need to give clean it off or whatever, and that's what they did with him, right?
Right.
But then you go back to Marva's speech about but the day will come when those two things will come together, and he's going to be an unstoppable force of good, or what was it? Unstoppable force for good is what she said, So, so yeah, I mean, he needed to hear that. He's got to be on that path. Otherwise, yeah, he falls into the trap of like a Saw Gerrera or any one of those.
Well, I love that what we associate with Clem early on, it was all of these negative, painful emotions of it.
Mm-hmm.
But the way that we see Clem at the end is a very positive and reinforcing. That Cassian actually smiles, touching the brick and thinking about this memory, and about what it means and how he's applying this and what it means for his life now going forward. So I really like that we took something from that was so, just heartbreaking with what they did with Clem and how the Empire made an example of him, and we've been able to spend that to where it's not forgotten, but it's just spun a completely different way to where it's a source of inspiration.
Yeah.
And Marva's just building even more so on top of that. And just the mom and dad routine of this for Cassian Andor is just something for him to continue to aspire and be inspired by moving forward.
I'm changing my answer. We didn't get enough. My gripe with this show is we didn't get enough Clem Andor.
I'm, after the last episode, I'm right there with you. I mean, it is a character that, but again, I think this is a character that we can come back and revisit in some other ways.
Yeah.
Again, as sources of inspiration. I think the same with Fiona Shaw's Marva as well. I think there's a lot there that we are going to learn that Cassian learned from them, that he's going to continue to draw on. I think it would be really great for those cameos to come back.
And to bring it back to our initial conversation about Indiana Jones 5, they could de-age them using the modern technology to give us... Okay.
You done?
I'm done. All right.
No, I'm bored with that, though, by that. Yeah. So
yeah. No, let's do it. I'll call Tony after this.
Well, that's the thing. We didn't really get a lot of clarity about the whole CIS thing, right? About which side of the fence, like, which side were they actually on? We didn't get a lot of that. We didn't get the sister aspect got dropped. Tony Gilroy won't talk about it. So clearly,
you're stealing my talking points here.
Oh, my bad. This is what happens when I don't read the show notes.
I'm just kidding. Well, sort of, but I want to start off with this. So we're going to let's talk about the characters, and we don't need to talk about all of them. I listed all of them in the show notes, Jonesy, so I know this overwhelms you. So
if they're listed, we have to talk about them.
Right. Uncle Harlow's in here too, by the way. So we're not going to talk about every one of these characters, but I just kind of want to get your thoughts on, like, what kind of a role do you see them playing? Are they going to be a bigger role? What do you hope to see? Do you want to see them? Do you hope to see them, et cetera? So let's start with, and normally we save the big one for last, but I thought let's just talk about Andor, right?
Sure.
And the first question I have is literally, are we going to learn the fate of Cassian's sister what happened on Kenari, the Republic ship mystery with the logos and, all of that? We talked about initially in that first arc or that first episode about, like, where the heck are all the adults? What happened to them? Did they literally all die in that mining accident, or was there something more? Does it feel like we're too far away from that now? Like, how would we even come back to all of that? I mean, the Kenari piece and his sister probably makes sense.
Yeah.
Right. But I don't know about the other stuff at this point.
Yeah. How much of the details do you really need to go back and explore? I mean, because again, like you're saying, what was the event that happened there that wiped everyone out? That we have an idea about, but we didn't exactly see that. There were examples of something bad had happened. There were no adults and things like that. But I think it's almost a certain we're going to go back and talk about Cassian's sister. Tony Gilroy won't talk about it. He's like, I'm not answering that question. Like, literally, that's what he's saying. Anytime someone asks him about Cassian's sister, I'm not talking about Cassian's sister. So yeah, flag. Hey, we're going back to talk about Cassian's sister.
We all know what that means. We're going back.
Right. Now, what direction does that mean? Did she end up with the Empire? Did she end up doing something else? Is she going to be part of the rebellion? Like, what does that actually look like?
Yep.
Who knows? That's our final hype show before we get into season 2, towards the end of next year or the beginning of 2024, whenever this comes out. So, but I think it is something we'll come back to. But it's a really good question about whether or not we will get a whole lot of details about Kenari. I'm going to go with not a lot of detail, but I think that I think they will shed a little bit more light on it. But again, knowing what they want to go and approach for season 2 isn't important to know at this point. And I think the answer is probably no. I mean, I hope I'm wrong, because I'd like to understand what exactly happened there. But
yeah, I'm with you. I think
it'd be short if we do. It'd be very concise. Yeah.
Yeah, concise. I think, and not to put words in your mouth, but maybe it needs to be relative to his sister. Like, I think that story is probably going to be there, right? It's probably a side story. It doesn't have to have any, like, we're so, at least personally, I don't want to speak for everybody, but we're so invested in Cassian Andor and his family now, in knowing what we know from his, about his sister. I think we're invested in wanting to know at least what happened to her, right?
Right.
So I think that still has to happen. It doesn't have to have an impact on the overall season 2 rebellion story, right? It can just be a personal side story thing that he's going down and working on, whatever. And so from that perspective, I think if they weave in the Kenari piece of it, I think that's how we get it, right? It's driven by the search for his sister, and that's probably about all. I don't think we're going to get any more than that.
Yep. Agreed.
But for Cassian, I mean, I don't know that there's going to be a lot of huge mysteries here, but anything else that you're looking forward to? I mean, we already know he's, again, this has already been talked about many, many times by Tony Gilroy and Diego Luna and everybody else, but there's a 1-year time jump. He is going to be part of, working under the rebellion, again, using air quotes right now. But is there anything else that we should you're looking forward to seeing, or is that going to be enough, or is it really just the KTSO thing? I think for me that seems like the most intriguing piece of it all. But
Well, I think if anything's been clear about Tony Gilroy, is I don't know what to expect. I mean, 12 episodes now. It's like, okay, well, what's Cassian's part in all of that? You
mhm.
know, what is it that he's actually doing to bring the rebellion together when it always feels like he's been a bit of I mean, even within the rebellion, kind of a mercenary, right? And an assassin. So I think there's another layer of the character that we don't know yet and that we don't. And I think that's exciting. I think that's something that's really cool. I'd like to see how much interaction there is with Mon Mothma. Like, how do those paths cross? Like, what do they, how much of each other do they know? And do they respect one another? What does that look like? I think, again, where does the relationship go with Luthen as well? And how does Andor view the relationship with Luthen? Is this really a
Yeah.
trustworthy relationship?
Hmm.
So I think there's a lot of angles and everything. Again, for the focus of the show, of course, it makes a lot of sense. But Andor is still kind of the one in the middle. Not to not to paraphrase anybody else, but he's kind of the spoke about what everything is channeling in and around. While he's not the most important figure in the rebellion by any stretch, I think he has got his fingers in it and can do a lot of things. He's a very versatile character. And I think that's going to be the really interesting part too, is that he can really go and do anything in any of these storylines. And when you think about a character like Vel, or characters like Bix and Brasso, or
Yeah.
Cinta, or all these other ones, Andor can interact with all of these characters really well. The only one we don't know that he has any need to or interest in or even contact with right now is more the political arena. And it would be interesting to see, that's one element that, what Andor do in a political arena.
Yeah. And I'm with you, like, and not to state the obvious, but a lot of what I'm most interested in with all of these characters is really just the aftermath of Ferrix, right? Like, you've got Andor now, who I'm going to just go out on a limb and say he's going to be part of the inner circle with as far as Mon Mothma and Luthen and Clea. Like he's just in there with them. He has to be, I think, in my opinion. And for me, that's exciting because one, I want to see what that relationship is like with Luthen. Like, does he look at Luthen as like a mentor? You
Right.
know, um, is he going? And does Luthen look at him as a mentor? Like, this is somebody that I can mentor. Eventually, wherever he's gotten his wealth from. Is that something that he would pass on, or the technology, or his whatever all that is? That particular piece of that relationship is very intriguing to me in terms of how that's going to play out. Um, and I think through that, not to jump ahead to Luthen, but I think through that relationship, I think if we learn any more about Luthen, it's going to come from that relationship. You know, he's talking about what he does, or he understands what Luthen is and who he is and his history, and conversations come up and we get to know that.
Yeah, I like that,
Same,
especially with the relationship. Like, that's one way for us to learn more about the relationship with Clea as
yeah.
well, and how what the hell that is, whatever it
I
is.
I had I wouldn't call it an epiphany, but I started scratching my head. The way she talks to Luthen at times, like I just wonder if she's like like she's the person in charge. Like she's the next step up in some ways. Like she's
Really.
pulling the strings and Luthen is working for her. She talks to him and says certain things that could be taken that way. I don't.
But then he kind of blows her off too. Like, no, we're already doing it this way. She's the voice of reason, I think, for him.
Yeah.
She's almost like the devil and the angel on the shoulder. She's both,
Hmm.
as kind of that guide. But yeah, that's interesting. They
But
both seem to have a certain amount of influence and share of that power and responsibility.
exactly.
But
Yep.
it still feels like Luthen is the final decision maker, though, at the end of the day. And I just
Yeah.
don't know if that's because of his more roguish, for lack of a better word, way of doing
Presence.
things. Yeah. Or
No,
if
I'm with
it's,
you.
yeah, or if it's something else.
But either way, like if she's not in charge, again, that's just a thought I had. If she's not in charge, I think 100% agree with you. Like she does speak to him as though they are on the same level of some sort, right? She has the same amount of influence and power. How did she get that? How did she, where is this coming from?
Are they
She doesn't.
married? Because it seems like they're married.
Right. Is this just a working relationship now and the love is gone?
All right. I'm shipping Luthen and Clea. Of course, I've been
There you
doing this
go. There
forever,
we go.
so it's not really,
Say, look at that.
I'm on
Get a
board with.
fanfic written, and then you can go on our newest EGM family show. Hey, so no, but there's something about her. Like, I do want to know more about that relationship as well. But so sorry, going back to Andor. The other thing that I'm interested in seeing is like now he's got this crew, right? He's got Wilmon, Brasso, Jezzy, Bix, B2. They're all on a ship. He's put them away. Has he tabled them? Has he put them away and said, "Okay, you guys are your story's over. You're safe. You don't have to worry about anything, and you never come out." Or are they fighting this rebellion or part of this rebellion with him? I would like to think it's the latter,
I
and
think so.
he's not just harbored them and put them in a safe house somewhere, and they're just kind of living lives working, with Cyril or whatever. But yeah, I don't.
I think they're
Because I think
involved.
there's some really interesting characters, and to bring up Wilmon again, we talked a little bit about this in the final episode. That character in particular is very interesting to me because it is similar. I mean, there's some parallels there between with what's going on with him and Andor, and how does Andor, how does he treat Wilmon? Is he, does he treat him? Does he look at him as like a son or a father figure in some ways, and vice versa? Is there a nurturing of that relationship in any way? Is he trying to bring him up, or is this kid already so far gone that he is steering towards a course of like Saw Gerrera and partisan, and Andor's constantly having to kind of rein him in and pull him back to the light, if you will.
Right. Yeah, I think this is a
Um,
group. I mean, this is a group again for Marva's memory. I think they're all enlisted,
yeah.
whether they like it or not. I think they've all pretty much enlisted.
What about Melshi? So Melshi said, he bounced and said, "Hey, somebody's got to tell this story." I think he's had a year now, so I think he's had plenty of time to tell the story if they want to go down that path. But do you anticipate that we'll see him in season 2?
I think so. I think
Yeah,
it makes sense. Yeah. Again,
I do
like
too.
yeah, these groups that have who as Andor gets closer to Rogue One, Andor of putting together this team that he usually works with, it makes sense that Melshi would continue to show up. Now, is he going to be every episode, every single week, and all of that? No, I don't think that's not been the formula for the show. Not that you can put a lot of stake in the formula, a lot of
Hmm.
a lot of certainty into that, but I think it would make sense for him to show up, especially maybe towards the last half of that season where things do start to come together a little bit, and we know we are getting to a much closer point of Rogue One if we're going to get that direct tie-in. The interesting
Yeah,
thing about this is that while we're a year removed from the events of where we're at now, of where this series started, we've still got like 3 or 4 years of time to bridge in season 2, which is kind of crazy because we started all this out 5 years before the events of Rogue One, right?
yeah,
And we've only gone about a year. By
right.
the time all this is said and done, about a year and a half, and so we've still got a few years to go. So there's a lot of things that are going to happen in season 2.
And I wonder too, like, I don't know that they're going to, I don't think they're going to take that full 3 years to tell this story. So, and which is good because I think that opens it up for more story to be told in that timeline. Uh, but we'll see. I mean, it's hard to say how much they're going to span over the course of this second season.
Yeah, I'm curious when they say they're going to go right up to the events of Rogue One, like how literal they really are about that.
Hmm.
Because
Yeah,
that's a lot of
maybe
time to cover in 12 episodes. But
it really is, especially
again,
with only a year jump. So,
yeah, but I think again, you can do. I mean, even in this season, right? There were several months that went by, presumably,
hmm,
and so I think. But does that happen all the time in order to get you there? Like it seems like you would have to take a 6 month or a 12-month jump at some point. And those are really difficult. If watching House of the Dragon is teaching me anything, like these time jumps, like when they just jump right into it, you're left like, okay, am I seeing the characters? Are these the same characters? Has anything changed?
yeah.
What's different? What the landscape feels totally different, and I feel like I'm moving at this breakneck speed, and I don't feel like they brought me along. So I'm hoping it's not like that because that's one aspect of that show I've really struggled with, and so I hope that's something that Tony Gilroy and company do not do.
Yeah, and I want him to make good on that line when he tells B2 that what is it? You always come through for me, or you
Yeah,
always have my back, or whatever it is.
right.
Like we didn't really got to see, never got to see that moment in the season. So the fact that he said that, I'd love to see some opportunity where B2 gets to kind of be the hero, like an R2 or a BB8. We've always had these droids step up in these really heroic moments, and there's the infamous line from Leia about when, and of course I've already lost it. Whatever it is,
Yeah,
don't underestimate
never.
the,
Yeah, don't never underestimate a droid.
yeah, sure. I'd love to see that for B2. Like, I think he's earned that,
And then he
especially with
dies
stuff
playing
like that
Marva's
going on.
speech.
Yeah. And then the other one for me for Andor is just that K2SO relationship, and we talked in I think it was in the it was in the final hype episode. When I think at the time we were probably not sure whether or not K2SO would show up, and we talked about how we didn't want him to show up, but maybe there were signs that he would. Season 2, we know he's going to be showing up. Alan Tudyk's already signed on for season 2.
Right.
I'll say what I said in that final hype episode. I'd love to hear or see a retelling of that relationship of it starting, breaking away from the comic book. If they don't break away from the comic book, then I'd love to see that. I won't call embellished, but enriched. Right. I'd like to see a better enriched story there. That's still similar to what happened in the comic, but just a little bit more than a one shot kind of thing.
Right. All right. Let's switch gears a little bit. I want to hear where you think Mon Mothma is going and kind of her political arena and the characters around her. What do you think? Where do you think that's all headed?
Well, this is the one that's so weird, because I was not expecting this. So first off, let me say this: I think Mon Mothma is playing a long game here with Perrin, right? I think I mean it's not revolutionary. I think everybody saw that, right? The moment she starts talking to Perrin in that last episode about, oh, where were you? You were gambling. Why didn't you go to Canto Bight? I can't believe you're doing this. Oh my God, you're lying to me. And she's saying all this, knowing that Clarice or whatever his name is, right, the driver, she knows well that guy's an inside spy at this point, right? He's working for Blevin, or at least she suspects it. So she's saying all these things to kind of play this long game. Like she's deliberately doing this. Now, one would think that this is a way for her to get around the money issue. You know, like if 400,000 credits are missing, oh, it's Perrin. He's been gambling. But yet she still follows through with this whole, Skulden relationship, Davos Skulden arrangement with her daughter, Lita. I do wonder if that's, I mean, I think that bed's already been laid, no pun intended. I think that's going to happen, right? I think she's already resigned herself to the fact that this is how that's going to be. I still think that's a very terrible situation for her to be in, to have somebody like Davos Skulden have that much power, be able to exercise that power whenever he wants, knowing what he knows or knowing that there's a risk that he could expose her in what she's doing. But it does sound like, if nothing else, she potentially is laying down the foundation for allowing more money to slip away without relying on Davos. I think she's trying to mitigate the amount of risk now that she has with them, and opening up this other, alibi, if you will, for what's happening with Perrin. She sounds like she's going to bury Perrin. What I started really getting, like, again, just a feeling. I'm not really crazy about it, but I'm starting to wonder too, like, how would you feel if they finally came around? Like this relationship, like Perrin came around. As much as I hate that dude, and I've said it so many times in the show, I hate that guy. But if Perrin starts getting buried, like, to me, the goodness of Mon Mothma would come out. But what if he found out? Maybe maybe there's a moment there in season 2 where he does come around and he takes a bullet for her, if you will. I don't know if you want to call it that. But there were certain things that were happening in their relationship. Like, as I was watching it more in my rewatch, I started thinking, that'd be kind of a cool situation, because I think we've all been led to just really despise this person and feel like there's nothing ever going to happen again. But wouldn't that be something if they pulled that around? And I don't know if that's too big of a ship to turn. But I would like to see more about that relationship and just how complex it really is with her in season 2.
Yeah, and I think when we first
Sorry, I
introduced
laid a lot out there for you.
No, I think when we first were introduced to Perrin, I mean, we had talked a little bit about it, and maybe it's not a very popular, perspective, but there's usually a reason why people behave the way they behave. And while we want to side with Mon Mothma, Perrin clearly feels a certain way. And so maybe they do find a path, a mutual path again, that they can do it. Now, I have a hard time believing that's going to happen, because Perrin's not dumb. And at some point, like, he has to know who Davos Golden is, right? I mean, doesn't it seem like he would know who this thug is? He runs in these upper echelon circles of Chandrila. It just seems like a character that people would know. And Perrin seems like he would be able to put 2 and 2 together, that this doesn't make sense. Mon Mothma does not deal with people like Davos. So what is going on? And it seems like this would just get messier and messier. Rather than bring them together, it just completely tears everything apart and makes it just all the more worse, right? So I'm really curious. That's an aspect I really want to see how they resolve that, or how that goes, or is the Mon Mothma that we see in Rebels, where she's giving the speech and she's by herself, is that really where she ends up, and that's her sacrifice? Like, she literally had to sacrifice everything around her in order, because this is the one thing that matters most. As sad as that is to say, or to consider, or what the ramifications for Alita looks like. It's a at some point we know everything falls apart, and that this would be the reason why a lot of that fell apart would make a lot of sense, right? And Perrin being the one to expose her, because he knows who Davo is, and it just took a lot of time for him to be able to figure out what exactly they were up to. And for him to, and maybe Perrin to come to terms with I always thought that maybe you were bleeding heart, but I had no idea that you were actually going to enlist in a rebellion.
Yeah.
And go to this extreme type of behavior, and have a side of him comes out that that completely wants to tear down Mon Mothma in every kind of way, rather than just be this narcissistic jerk, which is what kind of how we view him right now.
Yep. Well, I unfortunately for Mon Mothma, I think in general, I think it's going to be. I hate to say this, but I hope I'm wrong. But it feels like it's going to be yet another season of pain. Like I don't think it's going to get any better for her. Right?
We know it has to get worse,
It's
because
going to have to get worse.
we know where it ends. Yeah.
Yeah, and whether that means the loss of Perrin, whether she cares about that or not, I think that probably will happen. It could mean the loss of Lita. We don't know about the relationship with Vel. I think Vel's another character that probably has to go in season 2, right? They're already kind of painting the picture of nothing's really. She's already getting kind of lost, right? Cinta's out there, and she's, a rich girl running away from her family, to quote Cinta. So it doesn't sound like that's going to be good, but it just feels. And then you've got the Empire, closing in on the one thing that she has control over, which is what she feels like she still has, which is maybe power. Although I think that's going to be pretty fleeting very quickly if it's not gone already by the time we get to season 2. Right? She's
Right.
just a figurehead at that point. So what's left for her? I mean, it just feels like they do have to break her, because we know her better days are much further ahead, as part of leading the rebellion all the way through Jedi and even beyond Jedi. Right? So yeah, I think this is her story. I don't know if we get that much of it, but she's got a little bit more pain and suffering to go through, I think.
Well, I agree, and we're going to see that resolve, though. I think is what's going to be really important for Mon Mothma. And it's
Yeah.
that resolve is going to come through, and the power of the character is going to be front and center, and that's what we're going to learn in season 2 about Mon Mothma, is how she's able to continue to move forward and protect the rebellion, protect what is right, see what the hard choices are, and definitely she's going to feel that. I agree with you 100%. I think there's a lot of loss, whatever that actually might translate into for Mon Mothma in the future. But the idea of sacrifice is going to be, it's still going to be very present in season 2. We got a flavor for it in season 1, and yeah, we felt some characters sacrifice some things. We saw some loss in that type of mentality, but I think what we have to prepare ourselves for in season 2 is not maybe a mass wiping of the board, because again, we know they are built up to a certain point by the end of it, to where they are a full-fledged rebellion. So they have to continue growing. We can't just kill everybody. That's not necessarily what we mean by loss in that regard, but it's like actual formalized final loss in losing that relationship with her daughter. I think is the one that can really. She's already feeling it now, but maybe she feels like there's still strands of hope and all of that she can still recover from that if they can just make enough progress. If we can just get out from under the thumb of the Empire, I can do more. And we'll find out how realistic that is, or if it's a fool's errand. But yeah, I think Mon Mothma is one of the more interesting characters in season 2 of where we'll pick up, because I think, like you said, her life is about to just get more and more. It just get more and more complex and more risky, and she's in the lion's den, and with a political arena where everyone's vying for power already, and she feels like she is just fighting everyone, even if they don't know it.
Yeah. Yeah, as you're talking about loss, and I mean, you could have been describing Leia, right?
Yeah.
Not to bring that up, but just, I mean, we've mentioned this before. There are a few characters like Leia, a few characters other than Leia that have experienced so much loss and so much pain, and still continue and still move on and still keep the larger mission involved, have that resolve.
Absolutely.
But I think we're starting to see that for a Mon Mothma, right? I mean, we kind of knew that. We just never really, we never had this kind of, insight into what really happened with her.
Well, and
But
for
I'd love for
them
her to.
and the relationship that they have,
Yeah,
so
exactly.
throughout all of the books and everything else, and both contentious and positive, would just make so much sense. It would just
Yep.
it would just enhance all of that material for people who don't even know it exists, it was really, really cool for people to go and explore later on.
Ooh, what if they brought in like a Holdo to kind of help her too? Okay, all right, just more
That might be
wishful
a little
thinking.
much, but yeah.
Maybe a little much. What about Take Coma? Just quickly on him. Do you see him making it out? Because my theory, or I guess where my heart is like, okay, so if Perrin and her don't figure out a way to work things out, and Perrin gets a parachute here, then I want to ship these guys, and then unfortunately, something happens to Tay. Like that's the one thing that's still going good, and that relationship being rekindled, and then it gets pulled out from underneath her.
You know what, Albert? In the immortal words of Short Round, no time for love, Dr. Jones.
Always the
I
hopeless
think
romantic you are.
Well, I think for again with my mom, I think it just makes sense. I mean, and you have to wonder at what point we know the dominoes are going to fall, and we know they're just going to get obliterated around her at some point on Coruscant. And Take Homa, I mean, he's got to be on the watch list of characters that don't make it out in a variety of ways too. Either he's completely destroyed professionally, or maybe he's his life is taken from him. I mean, whatever it is, I mean, we know the bottom is going to fall out of the political arena from Mon Mothma, and everyone around her is at risk. And so it's just a matter of how far does that go. And a character like Take Homa being maybe not even a secondary, more of like a tertiary character, it's just a character that can be removed and is very much exposed, I think, at this point,
Yeah,
especially as an intermediary with Dalvo as well.
yeah.
With
I think he's
Devo.
going to be an unintended casualty, unfortunately.
Yeah, and again, I mean, you talk about loss for Mon Mothma that would really impact her, someone who she trusts, right? It's kind of like Vel. Like if she were to lose Vel, while they're not necessarily close, you can tell that there is still a very strong bond between them. That's more than just familial. It's just they understand each other. They've enlisted. They've taken this vow, and whether or not Tay has taken that vow as well, maybe not, but indirectly he kind of has. And he's the one person. So whether you ship them or not, keeping that aside, but that trust and that reliance on that character and that relationship, that helps keep her grounded. That gives her that outlet that she may not otherwise have, or that she feels very lonely and isolated. And without that, and when he's not there, I imagine it's almost suffocating to not have that outlet there at all without Vel or him. Who else does she turn to? And Luthen's not someone that she can go. He's not exactly easy to talk to. Clea sure as hell ain't easy to talk to. So who is that person that you lean on when you need to be, we need to lean on? And that's really Tay. And so, sorry, Tay's on borrowed time.
Yeah. I mean, we're almost, I hate to say it, but we're painting a picture of, I think what we're trying to do is paint a picture that at some point, and we could be completely wrong, but at some point, all she's going to have left is the rebellion.
Yeah.
Like that's all she's going to have the time for. It's going to be the only thing that means anything to her, because she's got to, vindicate, if you will, right? All of this loss. This is all, it has to all mean something. And so the only thing left for her is to put everything she has into ensuring that this rebellion gets started and is successful. That's how I read it, but again, we could be wrong. But that's why I think this is why we're going down the path of.
Well, I think that's what we see in Rebels, right? There's nothing left to do in Coruscant. Like all of the chances have been spent. All of the chips have been played. Everything you thought you could do, you were as effective as you could be. Everything you thought you could accomplish, whether how successful it was or not, but everything has been done, and it's no longer safe to be there. And you're right. All that's left is the rebellion. And that's the one thing she has to live for, is just for a better day, and helping move that forward to be a better day. But unfortunately, for that to happen, we know that Coruscant's got to fall apart for the rebellion.
Yep. All right, let's move to Luthen. I know we've already talked about Luthen a little bit, so probably not a whole lot of time here. But for Luthen, anything else you want to add that you're hoping to see with him? And then kind of fold in, we've got Clea, I've got Vel, Cinta, I've got Lonnie in here as well. And then Saul Guerrero. Your thoughts on, are any of these characters, do you want to see them in season 2? And if so, in what capacity?
Yes, for all of them. I
Next
think
question.
I think they're all important to have come back, right? And I think it's an extension of Mon Mothma, but Luthen's a little more dynamic, is that he's also in the field, right? So he's got this direct line to Saw Gerrera. Him and Clea have this political arena in Coruscant, and these relationships, and this these benefactories in many ways, but at the same, and they're spies, but Luthen is very much tied to what's actually going on and coordinating some of that. So I think the part with Luthen, the questions come back to, is he really the mastermind? Is he really the orchestrator of everything that is going on? Is he the de facto military leader that starts to emerge, or does that become someone else? What is that power? Is there a power struggle with Saw Gerrera? You know, we've already seen this rubbing of ideals and what they need to do, and who's looking at the short game, who's looking at the long game. Yeah, they both are inconsistent on both, right? We've seen them both do both and then completely cut themselves off the knees, you know, to spite themselves and to spite others. So how does that continue to evolve? What is his story in all of this? And when does Luthen say, he knows he's not going to see the end of this, right? He's not going to see where this ends up. He's already resolved himself to that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But what is it that, you know, what is his part to play aside from getting the pieces together, or is that really it? And so I think that's going to be the really interesting part about, you know, is there any evolution left to Luthen, or is this his purpose, and his purpose is, you know, only 6 episodes long, basically, or something like that, you know, before things start to really escalate beyond what he's capable of doing and kind of what his purpose was. What about you, though? How do you see the Luthen character progressing? What is it, the next stage you want to see for him, or how these other characters tie into that?
Well, I want to see where he gets his wins from. I want to see how he plays well with all the other people that are in the rebellion, the fledgling rebellion. You know, I see him as kind of like a warlord. I mean, there are other people out there, I would imagine, like the Ando Kriegers, and they rattled off a number of people, right, at one point. My guess is we probably will see some of those folks. I think it would be kind of cool to see that power dynamic that exists between all of them, much like we saw with Saw Gerrera. Saw was an easy choice because we all knew who he was and we could get a sense for it. But now that we've got all that established and we know that they do have some wins, and we now know that the Empire is on to them, right? So how does that change? How does that change the, I don't know, the strategy, if there is one, right? For him or for all of these guys that are out there causing these skirmishes and ruling as, quote, these warlords, is he trying to bring all of them together? Or is he still just kind of playing his own individual, um, you know, for opportunity, for profit kind of role that he's in right now, which is kind of where he's at. I want to see, you know, and not to bring up the whole is he a coward thing. I think I want to see the speech that Marva gave. I want to see that impact him in some way positively. I don't know what that is. I don't know if that means he's more engaged, or he's, you know, I don't know, he's more heartfelt about the rebellion as opposed to, I mean, I don't know what it is. Maybe he's softened in some way or whatever, but I'd love to see that speech have had an impact on him in a lot of ways. And I'd like to see Andor change him, right? Having somebody like Andor, who is this, you know, champion of good or whatever Marvo said, I think it's very different from him. He's been living in the shadows and living with these really dark characters and really doing some sketchy things. But then you got somebody like Andor, who, granted, still does what is going to need to do for the greater good in the rebellion. I think there's still going to be a dark edge to him. But somebody like Andor, I would love to see that relationship have changed him in some ways. You know, I don't know if he's going to have this front. Is he going to still have Luthen's Shop of Wonderful Horrors or whatever the heck that thing was? I don't know. I mean, do we move past that? Is that still going to be a thing? Is that going to be a cover for his character? A year later, I would think probably not. But, you know, I think that'd be very interesting one way or the other to see how does he keep this thing going? And if not, what is he doing now if he's bailed on that whole idea, you know?
Well, I like the idea of Luthen also bringing in characters like Draven or Dodana or who is Soto, and these other characters that
Yeah.
we know are instrumental, and they played vital parts even to certain stages, or and also maybe introducing us to the idea of Fulcrum,
Yeah.
you know, and actually formalizing that program, right? And again, we don't necessarily have to linger on that or oversell it, but to have those beats, to be the you know, the introductory establishments of those ideas or those characters, or the introduction and the you know, everything is starting to come together in different ways. and we have those characters be present, and we start to recognize some of them. Again, we don't have to belabor that and spend a lot of time with them because those characters have had other opportunities to develop in other ways. But to see them at this really pivotal stage and this really storming and informing type of stage, I think is really important to see those different characters come around. And these are characters that can bring about and have live on screen. I mean, these actors are still very, very capable, very much in their prime. Well, maybe Dodonna is a little bit different, but I mean, they can recast some of that, right? But Draven, I mean, he's actively working, on other shows that I've actually been watching. So, I think there's the characters that you can also bring back in and reintroduce that, again, give you more of that connective tissue to Rebels and to Rogue One.
Yeah, I'm with you. All right, and then as far as like Vel, since I expect them to be in season 2, right? We'll probably get more on that relationship. Lonnie, I think, is still going to be there. Who are the other Lonnies? He's got his people everywhere. It'd be
Right.
kind of cool to see more of that and just how much he's willing to risk there. And then Saw Gerrera, I think he's a given. We're going to get him in season 2.
I think we'll get a lot of Saw Gerrera in season 2.
Yeah, yeah, and then maybe a Jyn Erso now. I don't want to rule her out.
Well, is it
I think at this point,
let's back up. Is it Jyn Erso, or do you think it makes more sense for that to continue to be Galen Erso instead,
well,
even
and
if it's
then,
on the periphery?
yeah. So I in the final hype episode, and I think more recently, I'd said that season 2 for Andor, at least, I think it'd be cool if this whole season was really about him searching for Galen Erso, like knowing who he is, knowing what he's trying to do, or maybe not exactly knowing what he's trying to do, because I don't think he technically knows that until Rogue One, but just knowing that he's doing something that is massive, and Andor is constantly in search of him or more details about what it is, would be hugely impactful when we get to Rogue One, when he realizes, holy crap, you're his dad. And I think it recontextualizes that moment when he has the shot to take a Galen or so. And now you're weighing all of what happened in season 2 of Andor and just how determined and how driven he was to find this one person and kill him, because he knows that would put an end to, whatever this massive thing was. I think that would be hugely powerful. So I'd love to see, we didn't, even if we don't bring, what was it? I'm trying to think of the dang actor's name.
Oh, Mads Mikkelsen?
Mads, yeah. If we didn't bring him back, right? That's fine. But just knowing that he's in search of this mysterious figure known as Galen Erso, because he's well protected. We know that he's running around with Krennic. They've got him on the Imperial Death Star, or they've got him out on Star Destroyers. He's well guarded, right? Living this charmed life with, his family and all that. I think that would be interesting. So from that regard, I mean, I don't necessarily need to see Jyn Erso at this point, she's already left though. She's already working with Saw Gerrera. But it's
Right.
just a matter of the timing. Like, where are they going to cut it? Because at some point she does end that, so that we get the line of, I was a kid when you abandoned me, kind of thing. And it ties into the story from Rebel Rising. So, okay. So the final question, and I saved the best to last for you. No, we can make this quick. But Dedra and Cyril, like, I don't even know where this goes at this point. I think the biggest, and I'm not talking about them from a ship status. I just mean like,
Sure, you're not.
Their team that is now Dedra, Cyril, and I'm assuming Mosk as well. There were some things that were said by the actress, Denise
Goff.
Goff? Yeah. She mentioned something about, she made a comment that was kind of like cheeky about, is she going to be really working for the Empire next year, like in the next season? So like her loyalties are, because she had this big scare and what happened on Ferrix, and are they really just now committed to the Andor thing, or is she going to move up in the ranks? Do we see Cyril as part of the Empire? All of that. I mean, where would you like to see that go?
I mean, honestly, I'd like to see her double down and dig her heels in, and not, I mean, and she escaped with her life, and this is all because of this chaos that they're trying to, to tamp down. I mean, there's a path there for her to switch. I mean, as well, right? Seeing just how passionate, people are in the galaxy and what's going on, and then maybe she realizes the errors of their ways. But I gotta be honest, I mean, there's too much blood on her hands too, I think, with some of this stuff. I mean, they staged a contract killing and staged so they could lure, basically bait a trap. So that there's not a Empire angle for her or Cyril would be a bit disappointing, because I think we've doubled down on them being the villains, even though we've humanized them to an extent now and put this fear into them about what the galaxy, what is real life, outside of your Imperial ISB, pure white walls and everything, the safety of you going and orchestrating all of your events that you want to happen. It is very much, drawing things on a board rather than getting your hands dirty. And now her hands are, quite dirty, from crawling on the ground.
Yeah.
And so I would like to see that. I'd like to see that doubling down, because I think for Cyril too, he hasn't let go of Andor. Everything still pivots around that. The way that he responded to, knowing Andor was around, or I think he saw him, right? That.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, all of that is still there, right? He still blames Andor for everything. So I think that she brings them in. I think it makes a lot of sense. They're kind of her eyes and ears on the ground. And then we'll see kind of where that takes them from there. And then they've got that whole relationship thing.
Yeah, that's going to be awesome.
But
yeah, Mosk, I want to see where Partagrass, I'm like, I love that character. I'd like to see more of him in season 2. Maybe they bring back Wolf Yularen in some way. Edie, I don't know. I think she's done. I think what we got from her what we needed, which is
she's kind of served her purpose. Yeah,
she served her purpose, right? She opened his eyes and nearly took his life. And then of course I put Uncle Harlow in there just as a running joke. God, I hope we don't get more Uncle Harlow. So it's that relationship and that where those characters could go a lot of different ways. Honestly, it just depends. Especially again, this whole year thing just throws a wrench in everything, because we know we're not picking up immediately after the event. So a lot of what we are going to go through with all of these characters is really that aftermath. A year later, what does that landscape look like? Which is super intriguing.
Right.
Okay, so here's the last thing we'll talk about before we get out of here is this question that Tony Gilroy threw out there, and this is in the StarWars.com article. Where they did an interview with him. And the article says, Gilroy leaves us with one question as he looks ahead to the second season of Andor, which just started production. And this is his quote. He says, quote, "That's really one of the things we're most interested in. What happens to the, quote, original gangsters who are no longer so presentable to the community?" So he said, I guess the original gangsters, is he talking about the Empire in Ferrix? Is he talking about the characters of like Bix and everybody that left with Andor, or is there somebody else? Like I didn't understand the context of what he's speaking about here.
Yeah, it's a confusing way of putting it. Who are no longer so representable to the community. Yeah, there's so many different ways you could take that. I'm not really sure, to be honest with you. It's a very confusing.
No,
comment.
It's okay. I don't really understand the question, and it says that's, and they've got it in brackets, right? So like, but I mean, this is right from the article. So they don't give you what the that's is, other than the second season. Maybe that's what they're talking about. That's there. But the original gangsters who are no longer presentable to the community. So, and I think gangsters. Okay, so is that the Empire? How are they? Were they the original gangsters? And they were never presentable in the community, though.
Well, right. I mean, so you'd almost view this as, okay, is that an Andor, a Brasso, a Bix, right, from a Ferrix point of view, of like, so they're no longer the face of the community. They can't be front and center on Ferrix because, presumably the Empire is still there. They didn't just leave like, oh, hey, you beat us. Okay, we'll leave you alone now. That's not really how they work, right? That's not their
Sorry
MO.
about your mom, dude. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Sorry about that. Yeah, we good? Right. No. So, how do these communities take on from there? And again, when you think about it within the context of building a rebellion and piecing it together and getting it to gel and merge, those are the things. Without those people in the community, how and those OGs, how are you going to? How do those people? How do you bring all that together without leadership? Right? What does leadership look like? How does leadership emerge? Who are the people who are going to bring the band together and actually motivate? And this is the thing that we've seen this in other elements of Star Wars with the building of the rebellion, right? And Rebels in particular. You get cells of it, but then they don't really work well together.
Mm-hmm.
And so a guy like a Luthen, right? So Luthen, with the Andor aspect of things, with the Saw aspect of things, and with Mon Mothma is going to continue to have her power change over time and her influence change over time, probably pretty quickly. So when those things all break down, how do you make all of that work to actually bring it together when you know you have to bring it together? You don't have a choice, Tony Gilroy. You have to bring it together, right? He knows where it's got to end up. So how do you do that if you start losing the face of your franchise of sorts, right? So maybe that's kind of the aspect that he's coming across. How do you make a rebellion if you can't have these people, front and center in your community championing it?
Yeah, I can see. I hadn't considered that, but well, I kind of did. I mean, like you said, it's either he's talking about the folks that were on that ship that were the big quote gangsters, right? They were the big the people on Andor's side that were in power, who are no longer in power. Um, how do they come back to the community? What can they do for the community? Or you look at it from the Empire's perspective or from an Empire standpoint. Um, I don't know. It's a weird question, and I don't know. Hopefully, we'll get more background on what exactly this means because it. They leave it as a hook, right? They tell, "Oh,
Yeah.
Gilroy gives us one question," and then they leave it at this, and I was scratching my head for hours thinking, "I don't know what this means."
Piss poor journalism doesn't ask a follow-up question.
Yeah, exactly.
All right.
Or maybe I'm just dumb and I don't get the question. I threw it up on the chat. If anybody's watching the live stream,
Yeah, leave us a comment hey, we do a live stream. I didn't play. No, I mean, yeah, leave us a comment on YouTube, and if you're listening to the show and you made it this far, we'd love to hear kind of what y'all's thoughts are about where is this taking us. Is this more of like the rebellion and how that's being built, or is it more of an imperial angle that we're kind of missing? What is it y'all's take on this? So certainly go give it a check.
Yeah, I was also just thinking now the original gangsters. Maybe they're talking about like Saw Gerrera and Saw Gerrera, all the other gangsters quote that they listed off at one point. Anton Krieger, Luthen, right? Again, I don't know what presentable in the community. I mean, these guys were not really. They're not in the community. They're like hiding in caves where it's cold and
right,
hiding behind second characters or
and knowing the way that Gilroy talks, like he's not calling them gangsters. He's like just calling about like the original crew.
Yeah,
here are OG characters, right? Less so than like who are the actual original gangsters in Star Wars. No, it's
so who are the OGs then?
Yeah, the gangstas. He's like
who are the OGs then in Andor?
I think Andor, Luthen. I think Marva. I think Bix and Brasso. Again, who is the leaders and the pillars in the community? So, how are you going to continue to develop a rebellion and bring it in? I think Mon Mothma is another one too, right? Mm-hmm. Characters, even though she's working behind the scenes, for us, she's one of the original characters. She's one of the original rebels, right?
Yeah.
And thinking of more maybe that line of thinking where they can't be as influential as they were. So how are you going to consider to do your influence, and how do you make them presentable when your Star Wars community is not the Star Wars community, but these,
sure,
the fledgling rebellion communities. If you can't be on the HoloNet, how are you going to go and pull it all together?
Yeah, I think you're on the run and you're enlisting all kinds of other people, and there's a lot of risk and a lot of people dying.
Yeah, I mean the whole grassroots thing, right?
Yep.
But that's a long, dangerous, and difficult road.
Yep.
So I think you can kind of see that's a really interesting way of how do you tell that story? How do you develop it? How do you make it work? That's got to be quite a challenge.
Well, I'm glad we talked it through because I feel better about it now.
Oh, good. Glad we could help get ourselves there.
Yep. Okay, well, we'll leave it there. I mean, I know there's still more to talk about at some point when we get closer to season 2. I have no idea when this thing's going to wrap up production. Did they give us a date on season 2? Is that 2024?
I think all signs point to probably beginning of 2024 or first, maybe towards the end of the first quarter. Okay. It's still a ways away.
That would make sense, but yeah.
Yeah, the timing works. I mean, it's an older code, but it checks out.
Sure. Hey, do you have shout outs before we get out of here?
Hey, I certainly do. Hey, if you're listening to this and you made it all the way through, congratulations. You're better than most people. We do live stream this cantinacast.com/YouTube. Actually, fun story about that. I'm actually looking at maybe finding a way to simulcast on the website directly for these as well. So,
oh Lord,
why not?
Black magic, voodoo,
yeah, voodoo, witchcraft. Yeah, we do all the things here in Star Wars. But no, yeah. So cantinacast.com/YouTube. Leave us some comments about what you enjoyed about the episode, about the whole season, and if you've got some speculation about what this last line means, we'd love to hear that. But in the chat tonight, Jonathan, Kathy, Jorge, Steph, Lauren, Sky, Derpy501st, Dale, Music Train, Eugene, KG, Wookie Talks, and Gary. Thank you, everyone, for coming out, making your comments heard and known, and joining in the chat, and certainly appreciate helping us out along the way. We do appreciate it.
Yep. And we will be back on Sunday night.
Yeah, Sunday night from a certain point of view.
Certain point of view.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about our favorite moments of the second half of season 2. So this is a follow-up to the episode you guys did last month. And then, of course, we'll be back next week for yet another episode. It just keeps happening. So stay tuned.
Yeah, as we barrel towards the Christmas and New Year's holidays here in the U.S., it's going to be an interesting ride. We've got a lot of things to talk about and catch up on. So you won't want to miss it. We're going to be churning them out.
Tales of the Jedi, Phase 2. There's a lot still to talk about.
I mean, then we launch right into Bad Batch.
I know.
So no rest for the weary.
All right, well, that's going to do it. Thanks again to everybody that joined us for the live show. Hope to see you guys here on Sunday for the live recording of the Patreon episode. Any final words before we get out of here?
Nope. Thanks, everyone.
All right, we'll see you then.
You're still listening? Wow, that's amazing. Well, I'm here to give you the disclaimer. Normally we do a big, long, drawn-out disclaimer thing saying what's what and who's what and all that other stuff, but I think you guys kind of know that Lucasfilm and Disney have no affiliation with us at all, and we have none with them. We talk about Star Wars, which is their property, and all that other good, fun stuff, but I think you can tell which is our stuff and which is their stuff. If you can't, well, then send a lawyer to send an email to me, and I'll be glad to chat with them. Other than that, you know what's what, so that's your disclaimer.